security, such as the cyber criminals here can exploit the vulnerabilities over the supply chain. So this is a challenge, like how to secure this supply chain by introducing some techniques or quantitative or qualitative tools in order to secure it. And of course, with the huge number of IoT devices, so it will be hard to manage the attacks or to minimize the hackers. As some hackers, they will be able to launch such as the denial of service or the distributed denial of service or the zombie attacks. Here are some factors that can be affecting the trustworthy. So of course, we have to look at the security by applying some security mechanisms. We have also to look at the reliability by applying the reliable connectivity, ensure the consistent service quality. Focusing also on the privacy can play a good role in improving the trustworthy of the network. Applying some standards such as IEEE, so make sure to have the interoperability and the compatibility of these 5G and 6G networks with such standards, IEEE or ITUT. The resilience as well. So the 5G networks has to be resilient to the cyber attacks or any disruptions to ensure the trustworthy of the network. And it has to also go with the transparency as the network operators, they have to be transparent about their security or privacy practices and standards that they are using. Here are some mechanisms to approve or to guarantee the trustworthy, such as the secure boot. So here we can ensure that all the software or the firmware on the device are trusted. So in this case, we can increase or we can guarantee that this device is trustworthy. We can also apply the encryption or some of the encryption mechanisms to protect the sensitive data against any attack or against, let's say, the eavesdropping. The authentication, two-factor authentication can confirm and can guarantee the trustworthy over the network, applying intrusion detection or any intrusion detection systems. And nowadays we have these intrusion detection systems by having the artificial intelligence, and everything can be done automatically. Network segmentation, so by cutting the network or distributing the network into slices or into segments, so of course we can restrict the access to these segments and minimize the vulnerabilities over the network. Firmware and software updates, so it can be a solution as well to have the trustworthy over the network and to minimize the vulnerabilities and improve the security. The access control, so minimize the access to the network or restrict the access to some part of the networks. It can be the solution as well. These are some examples of assessment methods, such as the vulnerability assessment. So here, by understanding the system or the network and identifying and evaluating the potential attacks or the potential vulnerabilities, we can come up with this assessment and make sure to apply the trustworthy. Penetration testing by, of course, running or simulating some attacks on the network to identify the vulnerabilities or the potential attack vectors. Risk assessment, so here by evaluating the likelihood and the impact of these vulnerabilities to the system, and of course here can be done by having qualitative or quantitative methods. And the last one is the compliance assessment. So of course we can evaluate the network behavior to industry standards or any regulatory standards. Now, where's the blockchain here? Now, the blockchain, it can be, as you know, it's enable the distributed processing. So, of course, here, it's emerging technology where can be used to enhance the trustworthy over the network. And how we can apply this? So, of course, these are some practices where we can find the trustworthy by having the blockchain. The first one is by having this secure data exchange. So, of course, the exchange here or the data exchange will be secured, will be only for the authorized persons. Everything or every data transmitted can be encrypted and verified. So here we can tell that we are guaranteeing the trustworthy. The second practice here, or the second characteristic, is the smart contract. So by having like the self-executing contracts or agreements, so here we can automate this execution of the agreement between the parties, and we can tell that we are dealing with like trusted end users. The identity management, it's one of the practices where like the user identities can be verified, can be authenticated. So of course, we can tell that we have only the authorized persons or the authorized parties in this network. And here, still, I'm talking about the trustworthy. So here we can tell that like only the trusted persons will be over this network. The supply chain management, so it can create transparent, it can create like secure system for the network, and it can be tracked and verified, of course, for only the trusted persons. And the last practice is the decentralized security. So we can create a security system for the network, which can be distributed across the network and have the trusted parties. Now, when it comes to the federated learning, it's just like machine learning, but it's advanced machine learning, where the training will be done at the end devices. Then these end devices will be sharing their models or their trained models toward the server. So of course, here we are not sharing the raw data of the devices. We are sharing only the trained models. So when it comes to the trustworthy of the network, so here we can tell that federated learning can perform well and can provide some advantages here to the network trustworthy. Now, when we combine the federated learning with the blockchain, we can guarantee the trustworthy. We can also guarantee the accuracy as well as the security over the network. And how is that? These are some, let's say, points where we can find the blockchain with the federated learning and how we can provide this trustworthy. So the blockchain can create a secure access management or access control system for federated learning. So as I mentioned before, in the federated learning, we have individual devices or end devices who are sharing their model. So of course, here the blockchain can provide this control or this access control system. So of course we will have only the authorized persons or the authorized users will be like in this system. So here we will have only the trusted parties. The second point that blockchain can create the decentralized model management system for federated learning. So as I mentioned before, in the federated learning, we have like trained models from the end devices or from the end parties or people or clients on the network. So of course, here they can share their models and store the models on the distributed ledger, which is the blockchain, which will be really difficult for the attackers to tamper or to manipulate with this trained model. The third point is about like sharing this model. So the sharing of this model between or from the end devices toward the server will be secured and will be appended to the blockchain. So no one can, let's say, target these shared models. And the last one, blockchain can create the incentivization mechanism for federated learning. So of course, the participants here in the federated learning process who train their models will be gain some rewards for their contribution to the model update. This is one of my works about like using blockchain federated learning for 5G, 6G trustworthy. So as you see here, we have the end devices, which is like different type of devices or edge devices. And these devices were able like to train their models and share it toward the federated averaging, let's say, mechanism that has been done here on the fog. Then the only trusted persons here or the only trusted parties has been appended to the blockchain with the consensus protocol. So of course, only the authorized persons or peoples or parties will be appended to the blockchain, which will make it like trustworthy. And this is another work, which is like an extension for the previous work. So again, here I have the federated learning along with the blockchain, and everything has been directed to the blockchain. So this interaction has been beneficial for this network, and of course, it can provide like second line of defense or second line of security, not only like by having a federated learning, which is providing the privacy over the shared data, but also it provides the trustworthy. These are some points about this work. So as you see here, the overall trust over the network has been calculated or tested by having 3 scores. The first score is considering the security score or security trust score. The second one is the mobility, which consider like the secure mobility model along with the low power consumption. So here you can see the formulas, as well as I used the reliability as one of the scores. This solution is an adaptive solution. Why it's adaptive? Because it regularly checks the device trust and make sure like if this device is complying with the trust of the network. So let's say if we are considering the critical infrastructure or any critical application. So here I set like the accepted trustworthy to be 0.9 or more. So in case if the device is less than 0.9, it will not be considered as trusted device and will not be appended to the blockchain. So this is what I have considered here. Then, like, since it's regularly check this trust scores, of course, this is an adaptive, and it can adapt like the appended devices to the blockchain. Okay, let's say if a newly connected device is trying to be like part of this network, so this system will check the trust of this device. If it's more than the trust or the previous trust, so here we can tell that the newly connected device is beneficial for improving the overall performance. But if it's less than the previous one, so of course we can tell that ignoring this device will be beneficial or will be improving the overall performance. Yeah, I will skip this because it's almost the same formulas. Okay, so now by integrating the federated learning with the blockchain, as you see, I talk about like the advantage of this integration, but still we have some challenges. The first challenge is the scalability. So as you know, the blockchain requires a large amount of computational power and storage for the devices. And when it comes to the federated learning, we have like a huge number of devices that are exchanging data and models. So in this case, it will be challenging like to integrate both federated learning and blockchain. The second challenge, it's about the interoperability. So since blockchain has different networks, federated learning has different frameworks, consider different applications. So this interaction between both technologies can be like an issue here. So we can, one of the solutions, like by hindering the stakeholders' collaboration in the 5G ecosystem, it can be like type of solution for this interoperability problem. A third issue is the governance. So blockchain and federated learning, they require a clear governance structure to ensure the transparency between them, the accountability, the interoperability, the fairness. So of course, since we have no central authority to enforce the rules and regulation, so here we can tell that we still have a problem in the governance. And the last one, it's about the regulation. So of course, adoption of blockchain along with the federated learning in 5G network may be hampered by different challenges, such as the lack of clear guidance or standards. So having such standards for this integration, it can be a solution here. Some future trends in this direction. So the first one is the hybrid architecture. So having like combined architecture that is centralized with the decentralized, it can address or solve the problem of the scalability and the interoperability. The edge computing, so by enabling like more secure data exchange in federated learning while reducing the computational over these devices or on the blockchain, it can be the solution for the scalability. Like standardization or some standards, common protocols, frameworks for blockchain with the federated learning and 5G networks, it can improve the interoperability and the compatibility of these networks. And the last one, by increasing the collaboration between different stakeholders, it can help to address the challenges of the adoption of blockchain and federated learning in the 5G networks. So yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Safa, for the very interesting presentation. Probably we can pick 2 or 3 questions from the audience. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you for the very clear and detailed presentation. I have a question. Can you come back to the slide 18? Where you talk about the, yes. Can you tell me more about how you calculated the trust score?
Yeah, okay. So as I mentioned here, like I have considered the 3 items. The first thing is the trust by considering the security. And here I choose like the encryption technique and the accuracy out of the encryption technique, along with the secure, like the trust on the security. The second item, it was considering the mobility. So here, like based on the mobility model, I have tested the 3 mobility models here, and I end up with the one that performed the best, along with the power consumption on these models, okay? So I choose the best one, the power consumption as well. So actually there's no clear formulas for this trust evaluation using like these 3, but this is like I have simulated different items and I come up with these equations. Then at the end...
And one more question, please. What do you do for the device if you find its trust score it's not good enough?
Yeah, okay. So since here this work, it was...
Interesting presentation. My question is about when you deploy the federated learning model to secure your data. My question is about the data. How did you collect it, or has been transferred?
Intelligent transportation system. So it's about like vehicles. Yeah. And there's also a general data set that has different fields as well, but it doesn't have any characteristics or any features for the blockchain. So it has been appended as is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you. Thank you.
Before leaving the stage, I invite Professor Ladi to hand you over this token of appreciation from the conference organizers.
Thank you.
So I invite to the stage Mr. Payush Alan, who is Managing Director at Cybersecurity America. We'll be talking on blockchain and cybersecurity integration possibilities. So the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're all well today. Can everybody hear me? terms of all of these wonderful technologies that are out there, but some of the core technology, what the sort of connection's gone. This doesn't work, but I'll carry on with this. So just to provide a perspective on what a smart city is, it uses a variety of technologies to help analyze and quantify data for the value of citizens, for the value of an infrastructure, and for the value of the economy within a smart city environment. Urban mobility, so there's a lot of varying aspects as to where it can provide value. The types of technologies upon which are applied within smart cities vary. So they include such things as cloud computing, big data analytics, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, and blockchain. For today's presentation, we're going to be focused on blockchain and the Internet of Things, but as can be seen by this slide, there are so many compounding and varying technologies which would add value into a smart city, and it would be the utilization of those technologies which can further add value. Because this is at the beginning of the evolution cycle as such, when we talk about blockchain and smart cities, there are some countries out there which are sort of undertaking initiatives, but they're still not it doesn't appear to be, from research, a lot of countries at the moment with the combination of smart cities, IoT, and blockchain as such as a jigsaw set. So we've got countries such as Dubai, Singapore, Morocco, Estonia, South Korea, and China, which are involved with certain aspects of it. This conference, as I understand, there's a focus around 5G, and what I've sort of put on the board up there is around actually what does 5G represent within the context of blockchain and smart cities. In essence, the introduction of 5G facilitates faster data transmission. This will support the process of reducing the time for new blocks to be created, so it provides some sort of acceleration mechanism. It will also allow the increase of data volumes, so 5G can support massive amounts of data generated by blockchain applications in smart cities. And finally, it will improve items such as connectivity and reduce latency, so devices will always appear to be connected and interact with each other seamlessly. The fundamental aspect of this presentation is around the business drivers for blockchain. So what I've done is I've used this as a reference point from the United Nations. So the United Nations in 2015 created a selection of 17 sustainable development goals, which address the most pressing challenges of humanity, the economy within a city, and infrastructure. So they talk about things such as reducing poverty, zero hunger, partnership for goals, life below water, and climate action. I've done some research on this, and some of the actual smart cities are focused on the following. So smart cities with blockchain, the ones that I researched on, are focused on providing affordable and clean energy for citizens, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, sustainable cities and communities, and partnership for goals. And the next slide will provide a bit of an overview in terms of actually against those 4, 7, 9, 17, and 11, forgive me, what from a business perspective. Companies, and I think that affordable and clean energy from a people and business standpoint with blockchain is around decentralized energy trading. Peers can kind of converse with each other around selling energy as well. So blockchain is a good facilitator for that. From an energy grid standpoint, an actual energy grid can integrate renewable energy within current energies. So you might have, let's say, nuclear power or other forms of power, but you can ensure the integration of other energies like solar or wind energies through utilization of blockchains. And finally, government can reduce energy waste because they would have, I guess, a much more formulated view as to actually how their energy is being distributed and provide affordable and clean energy. From a industry, innovation, and infrastructure perspective, another beauty of blockchain is that it actually provides smart contract buyer-seller agreement terms. So reduce congestion, so they can aid the efficiency as to the way the city operates from a commutability perspective. For point number 11, sustainable cities and communities, blockchain can help around voting decisions, or it's a technology which can help facilitate voting decisions. So you could engage within your smart city, and the government, or the actual, in essence, could get the views of consumers or get the views of its citizens as to actually, what should be done within the actual smart city as such. So people who live within the smart city can play a better role around making decisions as to what the government takes. Further to that, blockchain provides some sort of control form around preventing unauthorized access, and that's a fundamental control, I suppose, not only within the blockchain, but from a cybersecurity perspective. For partnership for goals, blockchain is a facilitator for fostering financing and collaboration for global partnerships. It will allow entities to significantly collaborate together, given the nature of what it is and what it represents as a technology, and it allows people who don't necessarily know each other to kind of form a sort of collaborative relationship to move forward with a business initiative. If we talk about those actual business drivers and look at some of the technologies, whether it be blockchain DLT on the DLT side of things, or cryptocurrencies, or smart contracts, or IoT, or identity, some of the sort of key fundamental benefits from a DLT standpoint against those 4 sustainable development goals relate to collaboration, as just previously mentioned, and the other aspect is around facilitating things such as collaboration for global partnerships and industrial development within a smart city. From a crypto standpoint, the benefits of using that particular blockchain technology is within a city, it facilitates incentivization of changed behaviors. So in essence, the citizens of a smart city would get rewarded for certain behaviors around reducing waste, or certain behaviors around trading energy. So there are a lot of beautiful benefits that can be derived by using this technology. From a smart contract standpoint, smart contracts can be used to generate and sell excess energy. They can also help significantly facilitate and streamline certain projects as well, given the nature that it's a code item which allows certain things that would be done in manual form to be automated and be made more efficient. It can also be used to track funds and donations for development projects. The benefits of the IoT part, which relates to number 11, sustainable cities and communities. It can be used to monitor things such as data on air pollution, noise, and also it can be used to, let's say, prevent, let's say, certain criminal activities. So there are certain aspects of IoT which can be used to monitor. I've seen on gun crime as well. So there are a lot of benefits around some of the IoT technologies. And finally, the identity aspect, which again represents a fundamental cybersecurity control, that can be used within the context of controlling access to certain elements of blockchain components, and it can be used to control access to infrastructure projects and also tracking fund donations. So we've got all of these business benefits, and in essence, with all these benefits within a smart city, there are going to be unfortunate individuals which are out there which have negative intentions, have a reason to, in essence, compromise the smart city. And these represent the types of entities. So you've got cyber criminals and hacktivists, which might hack for political or social reasons. Cyber criminals with the intention of stealing data or with the intention of compromising bank details. You might have nation-state actors who might do it for strategic advantage or disrupting critical infrastructure. And then finally, you might have insiders who might have an intention to commit fraud or espionage. So those represent, let's say, summary threat actors who might have an intention, in essence, of compromising a blockchain and IoT components within a smart city. So the slides that I'm going to talk through briefly talk about, let's say, a selection of varying types of attacks that could occur, what sustainable development goals would be affected, and the rest of the sort of slide deck talks about, let's say, summary countermeasures which could be introduced. So let's take, for example, a ransomware attack. You could have hackers launching a ransomware attack on a blockchain used for financial transactions, and they request the city council to pay for ransom for unlocking the encrypted blockchain. The sort of smart city risks which relate to this could be financial, business trust, or consumer trust related. So in essence, you could lose the reputation of the city as a safe place for doing business because business trust has been destroyed because of the actual attack. You could potentially lose funds financially as a result of such an unfortunate attack, and finally consumer trust, where certain visitors to the city, which typically, let's say, use those services historically, have now been put off because it's been subjected to a ransomware attack. The impact to a sustainable development goal for this type of attack could relate to sustainable cities and communities. And the sort of, let's say, summary security countermeasures which relate to hopefully mitigating some of that attack are as follows. So taking regular backups and storing them off-site for some of those components which have been affected on the left, on the DLT and the smart contract side, introducing multi-factor authentication and introducing governance access points to blockchain, ensuring regular updates are undertaken for blockchain nodes, firmware and hardware, monitoring and response, so obviously introducing monitoring mechanisms to check for any undue or erroneous or suspicious activities, and introducing appropriate resiliency measures which relate to disaster recovery planning, and finally training and awareness. Some of these controls that you see here are in essence marry across into some other sort of attacks which we're going to discuss shortly as well. The next attack is a malware attack. So, as an example, attackers hypothetically inject malicious code within a smart city and compromise the integrity of smart contracts on a development project. The risks, again, for this one could relate to financial loss. So funds could be transferred to unauthorized accounts. A project could be delayed in terms of its execution as a result of a smart contract compromise. And finally, there might be something going on from, let's say, property investment or some sort of happening from a business standpoint, and the terms of agreement could be potentially modified for the benefits of other individuals or other parties, which again could cause a major issue. The impact for this one is partnership for goals, if a malware attack were to occur. The sort of mitigating measures around this relate to the introduction of, let's say, code reviews, so regular vulnerability assessment and testing methods in place to ensure that there are no actual observed or key vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities which are identified should be mitigated. Appropriate training should be embedded or put in place within an organization which is going out there and developing certain contracts like this, so that staff are aware on best practice measures to deliver secure smart contracts. And finally, points around access control. So limit individuals who can access data to critical systems which are fundamentally using these smart contracts. The next 3 points, and in essence I mentioned before, some of these points from a security standpoint come up again and again because they represent key controls. So there is a focus on disaster recovery planning, continuous monitoring, and there should be regular updates of smart contracts. Finally, I think this attack was mentioned earlier on another presentation, the 51% attack. So the theory around this is an attacker conducts a 51% attack on a city's transportation systems and gains majority control of the blockchain network and manipulates data and transactions. The risks for this one could be transportation delays, consumer delays, so your train schedules could be altered, or finally, data theft. So data could be lost or stolen related to a transportation system. So this particular attack will be highly impactful to number 11 and number 9, which is focused on sustainable cities and communities, and finally, industry innovation and infrastructure. The sort of countermeasures around this particular form of attack relate to using proof of stake rather than proof of work, which is meant to substantially reduce risk of a 51% attack. utilizing decentralized architecture, so distributing across multiple nodes to reduce single node compromise. Node authentication, only authenticated nodes should be allowed. And finally, again, our old good friends, continual monitoring, regular updates, and always processes around respond and recover, which I've sort of seen as a cybersecurity practitioner. If we take, let's say, the NIST cybersecurity framework, I've seen a lot of organizations based upon their maturity typically focus on that sort of control around respond and recovery. So we're introducing methods around incident response management, methods around root cause analysis, and processes around introducing, let's say, security information event monitoring solutions. Finally, from an IoT attack perspective, hackers attack a smart city system that uses IoT devices and blockchain to manage waste disposal and alters waste collection data. That's a problematic one. That, from a smart city standpoint, could affect things such as health and sanitization through pileup of waste if this city was subject to compromise. Ransom demands could be made by hackers as a result of getting the city cleaned up. And finally, reputational damage could occur to the city as well as a result of this particular risk. The sort of countermeasures for this one relate to should be around secure firmware. So boot and firmware verification processes should be introduced. There should be appropriate authentication methods around access to certain IoT assets. The network should be segmented and from other parts of the network to reduce the likelihood of unauthorized malicious actors actually bunny hopping into IoT-based infrastructure. Data encryption represents another key control, and fundamentally there should be key controls around governance, around device vendors, and continual monitoring. So that provides a little bit of a conclusion up here. So in essence, the kind of key takeaways, as I believe from this, are that 5G can accelerate the use of blockchain in smart cities. From a sustainability development perspective, smart cities predominantly support a number of goals, namely 7, 9, 11, and 17. So affordable and clean energy, infrastructure, automation and infrastructure, sustainable cities and communities, and partnership for goals. There are unfortunately a selection of threat actors out there which have malicious intent, which might want to compromise those smart cities, and they include individuals such as cyber criminals, hacktivists, and nation-state actors. There are emerging threats, as we've uncovered within this presentation, which focus around introducing techniques such as 51% attack, malware, IoT, and ransomware. And these are more likely to go up as the deployment of blockchain and smart cities become more widespread. 5G, in my mind, represents one of the sort of key accelerators for this. And that's my conclusion. So thank you very much for your time, ladies and gents.
Thank you so much, Payush, for the insightful talk. Probably we can pick 2 or 3 questions from the audience. See several hands raised. Okay.
First of all, thank you for your clear and interesting presentation. I have a question on security countermeasures.
Yeah.
For continuous monitoring for blockchain, is it any different from other information system solutions? Because usually it's like for monitoring, it's usually, as far as I know, centralized. So when we're talking about blockchain, how is it? Is it different first, and if so, how so? Thank you.
So we're looking at a process around evaluating certain vendors as we speak. So there are some companies out there that we've identified. So we would be looking at things, let's say, know your customer type transactions or any sort of transactions around fraud. So we're looking at certain vendors which provide which mitigate a business purpose or a business need. So I've come across some vendors. Some of those vendors which provide that, let's say, that monitoring solution are a little bit of a variance in terms of the vendors that I've seen, let's say, in the security space. So in the security world, we've sort of assessed vendors around deploying a SIEM type solution, and those SIEM type solutions could be the likes of, let's say, QRadar and Splunk and Alien Vault as an example. So I am seeing differing vendors, and those vendors that I've seen on the blockchain side of things kind of monitor different types of controls, but fundamentally some of the controls relate to certain business practices, which could relate to know your customer, which could be applied across again into some of the security technologies which I've looked at, but some of the security technologies are provided by different vendors. Okay.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, sir, for your interesting presentation.
Thank you.
I would like just to ask you about, so you explained that by using blockchain technology in smart cities, we can reach the 7th goal, which is clean energy.
Yeah.
However, we know that using blockchain technology requires a very high energy consumption.
Yeah.
So how could we, using blockchain, which requires a very high energy consumption and at the same time, clean energy?
So actually, I see what you mean. It's like it could be a contradiction in its own self, can't it? So it's like you're utilizing blockchain technology, which in essence capitalizing upon high energy consumption, and actually you're trying to introduce smart energy. So the research that I did on this through commercial sources, it came out that some of those countries, such as let's say you saw on the list there, like Estonia, etc., were focusing on using blockchain technologies within smart cities, and they related to some of those SDG goals. I think that's a fair point. I'm guesstimating as a result, as blockchain technology as I understand it, so if I say, let's say in cloud computing terms, when I went to certain conferences about 10 years ago, there was a sort of maturity curve on cloud computing, and now cloud computing in my mind is at this level of maturity. Blockchain technologies I feel are a certain level of infancy compared to certain cloud computing technologies. And I'm of the view that it's been mentioned that they provide value to those SDG reference points, and I'm assuming as a result of certain evolving technologies which might associate to blockchain, we can further reduce upon energy consumption as well. So it's a little bit of a gray area, but the research has identified that it relates to that particular point. Okay.
Probably I can ask you the last question.
Sure.
So I really love the way you connected the SDGs with the objectives of smart cities. But when a disruption occurs with reference to specific SDG, for example, let's take mobility.
Yeah.
It certainly affects other SDGs like education, quality education, SDG 4 or SDG 3 for healthcare.
Yeah.
So how do you see this, correlation among the different?
Actually, so actually, I think that's a really good question on this, because when I was doing the research, it came up against those four, and I had a bit of an appendix produced to say it's those four. But actually, there's one around reduced poverty. It's like banking the unbanked. And there's millions and billions of people out there who don't have a bank account. And as I understand it, blockchain technology is an enabler for that, or could be an enabler for that. There's another one around the food supply chain. And again, I didn't mention that in the SDG, but when I did some research personally, not from what I saw from commercial resources, I thought actually it will introduce efficiencies around the food supply chain, and that means actually you can endure zero poverty. Sorry, there's around zero food or something, improve on that. So blockchain, as I understand it, not only provides value to those four SDGs, but it can cross-pollinate and add value to other SDGs as well. So I can't I agree with you, but for the sake of this 20-minute presentation, statistically, I saw those four.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you again. Please stay here. I invite Professor Ladi to have a token of appreciation for you. So we move to the next speaker. So we have Professor Jean-Pierre Bien-Aimé, who's chairman of Ubiquity Consulting. Will be talking about 5G World Forum. So he will be, talking online. I don't know if, yes, he's already online. Hi. If you can just share the presentation, exactly. Okay. Go to the first slide.
Hello, everybody. Just some small issues. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Latif and all. This same summit took place last year in a similar summit in May, if I remember well. So it's a pleasure to be here again after having been on site 3 years ago in Rabat. So I hope next time I will be on site. So coming back from Barcelona Mobile World Congress, I will try to draft an overview of the 5G to 6G roadmap, global market, opportunities and challenges. First the slide, as stated by GSMA Intelligence at the show last week. 5G availability spreads across the world now, and you can see in light blue the live 5G networks on this map, and in dark blue the planned 5G networks. So 5G adoption varies around the world, but is available in most regions of the world, and next wave will be with emerging markets. Owing to GSA statistics, fresh statistics of February, 245 commercial 5G networks have been launched worldwide with diverse services, partial or complete 5G services. And what is interesting is that on this total, already 38 operators have deployed or soft launched the standalone 5G, that is to say the 5G phase 2, release 16, which is the next big progress in 5G. Over half of mobile connections are forecast on 5G by 2030, and it has been stated last week that 5G adoption, 5G subscriptions have been still twice as quick as were the 4G subscriptions adoption, which is important to mention. North America, East Asia, and markets will continue to lead on 5G adoption. Europe is following, expanding its coverage, and emerging markets are also behind, but rapidly taking up. I have voluntarily put a slide I had presented already last year at the previous summit. Sorry, it's in French, but I think it's important on a simple way to understand the phases of full 5G and the elements and components of full 5G. And you have on the left radio, what is considered as an evolution, which was the release 15 with a new radio and EMBB deployed in 21, launched 19, 20 partially and deployed in 21. You have the strong evolution with release 16, with access and with the network, core network, which is a strong evolution, being deployed. This is the SA, the 5G standalone that is being progressively deployed. And you have what is really a revolution with 5G, the service, and which will be totally deployed with release 17. That is to say, next year, late this year, but mainly next year. So this shows that 5G is a long journey, and that beyond some premature marketing announcements in 19 and 20 in some parts of the world, it's important to accomplish really what is the full 5G to benefit and to make customers benefit from the full including the speed, because of course EMBB gives the speed with the new radio, but it's only when you will have the end-to-end 5G system, radio access service network, that also the speed will be at its utmost. Important to understand. What is the 5G standardization roadmap, starting from LTE advanced with the 3GPP release 14, release 15, 5G phase 1, 5G phase 2, release 16, SA, standalone, and the coming 3GPP release 17 that has been frozen last year, but of course that is being progressively deployed, commercialized on the products and services will be on the market later this year and next year. And the next 5G advanced 3GPP release 18. So just a list on 3GPP release 17 features. I will not repeat all those features, but perhaps insist on further enhancements on new radio MIMO, dynamic spectrum sharing, industrial IoT, NB-IoT, network automation for 5G phase 2, RAN slicing, network slicing phase 2, edge computing, enhanced V2X for vehicles, and our non-terrestrial network, satellite, multicast broadcast, satellite components, and NNR extended reality. So this shows you that the verticals have definitely collaborated, participated in the standardization of this release 17. And it's what has to be mentioned. It's the first release where verticals, industries really have participated at the 3GPP in the standardization process, which was not yet the case for release 16 and of course not for 17. So this is the reason why I insist on the importance of this release 17 deployment, because this is the real full 5G, not 5G advanced, but full 5G on which we will be able to rely for all applications of 5G, enterprise and consumer. Most promising applications, I will not detail, but you have safer mobilities with smart cities and autonomous vehicles, more fluid logistics, platooning, health in real-time telemedicine, telesurgery, Industry 4.0, preventive agriculture. I put a slide also of my TSDSI colleague, India, Shikha Srivastava, for 5G benefits and application areas with also teleeducation, remote healthcare, intelligent transport system, and new application areas such as augmented virtual reality in real time, UHR live TV, and 4K video telephony. Benefits, real-time machine-to-machine, real-time communication, and high latency. But there is currently, and it was seen in Barcelona last week, where there was really a few presentations and a little number presentations on future 6G, but mainly the master word in Barcelona last week was 5G, 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 and 5G monetization, 5G use cases. Because really, if we can be glad on the 5G adoption in terms of 1.1 billion customers at this beginning of 2023 connections, nevertheless, the uptake is not so strong as expected with, in consumer and also enterprise side. And it's important to push a 5G acceleration, as it was said also. I've taken an example presented by the Chief Revenue Officer of Verizon. His, let's say, his means for 5G acceleration and 5G monetization. On consumer side, improve the overall experience of consumers with increased consumption in some venues such as concert stadiums, train stations, make them benefit from more capacity with premium unlimited plans bundle with content services, such as, for instance, Disney bundle. Fixed wireless access is also highly chosen. Network experience is there central with comfort, capacity in crowded venues. For enterprise, B2B side, mobile edge computing for private networks. Use case in industry verticals will be key apps. And with 5G standalone, new services such as network slicing, QoS, and low latency end-to-end. But we see that this is under deployment and will be full of capacity with release 17. And sales opportunities in next 5G phase, enhanced value proposition for customers from unlimited plans to premium unlimited, and additional use cases with 5G SA and end-to-end solutions. Then it was, of course, metaverse was the buzzword of last year, and it's expanding. It's rapidly expanding. And I took a definition from IEEE. Metaverse refers to a kind of experience in which the outside world is perceived by the users as being a universe that is built upon digital technologies, a different universe, VR, digital extension of our current universe, AR, or a digital counterpart of our current universe with a digital twin that are used everywhere. So now to come back on telecoms and 5G, can 5G deliver what it takes to run metaverse, such as latency, user experience data rate, and reliability? Here I took another quotation examples from Orange, with views from Michael Trabier, the CTIO, Chief Technology Innovation Officer, to meet that for an operator like Orange, to meet the demanding requirements for connectivity and immersive experiences, the operator needs to ensure high bandwidth, 5G and fiber, low latency with 5G SA and fiber, end-to-end guarantee on the latency, sustained quality over time, on the long run, long-standing, guarantee on a stable connection, bandwidth and latency. Requirements, here also, edge computing in 5G SA. And above all, for consumers, safe home connection with FTTH, but mainly robust box, gateway, and Wi-Fi to support the extended reality services. Now, let's go to the future, to the roadmap towards 6G with the 5G Advanced, release 18. Here also I took a slide from my India colleague, Sika Srivastava, which is quite interesting in summarizing the features that will be brought, because it's not finished. The research is undergoing. On release 18, such as satellite connectivity, such as XR, multicast and broadcast, such as AI-based RAN core, such as MIMO evolution, such as dynamic spectrum sharing, and so on. So here is also a representation, of course, limited, it's not detailed, from a 6G network architecture with insistence on a distributed architecture, with also the cloud, the massive MIMO, and the vertical applications. If we wanted to summarize what 6G will bring, we could say that it will be 5 times, it's expected 5 times faster than 5G, terahertz bringing terahertz communications, MIMO, AI, ML learning, quantum communications, and bio nano things, among others. Then in Europe, what are the plans in Europe? And I will not go on the field of my colleague Jorge Pereira, but the 6G Smart Networks and Services Industry Association and European Commission are leading the 6G SNS network, joint network undertaking, GNU, with the principles on the society, policy on EU values, and boosting business and technology sovereignty is important, secure infrastructure and data, and human-centric approach. So rapidly, we can say that the enablers will be flexible architecture, advanced radio access, cloud native AI, holistic cybersecurity, and its expected services such as advanced for verticals, metaverse, digital twin, and holographic communication. So this table will give you as a reference a tentative comparison between 5G, beyond 5G, and 6G, with what is brought by the three, let's say, steps in terms of frequency bands, device types, architecture, services. And to finish, this is a limited but a bit poetic representation of 6G application areas, such as use cases, such as high-performance precision agriculture, real-time remote healthcare, intelligent industrial automation, communication space in deep sea, holographic communications, and many other ones. Thank you very much. This is the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Professor Bien-Aimé. Probably we can pick just one question because we are short of time. So, any question? Okay. Okay, probably I can just ask a quick question. Well, for the metaverse, there was a lot of discussion. There were a lot of discussions related to 6G as one of the potential enabling technologies for, for the requirement of metaverse. But I know that 6G is still very far from now, and even 5G is not deployed in many countries, and it's under deployment. So, what's the perspective for 5G as the enabling technology for the at least the what's happening now within the metaverse technologies?
Yes, it's a good question, and what you ask is that perhaps there will be not a good, let's say, synchronization between what the 5G can really bring as an enabler and the already present metaverse. But my response will be first, metaverse is still a concept. It works, of course, with virtual reality and augmented reality, but and also with cryptocurrencies. But there is still much to be developed in metaverse, in particular also in security, in order it passes from the concept to the reality. And second, in order the operators, the telcos, will be keen to cope with this challenge, to be ready for the metaverse. And I am sure that as soon as the 5G SA standalone will be enough split over the world, they will have the ability to sustain and to support that.
Okay, thank you so much again, Bien-Aimé, for the great talk, and hopefully we can see you here in person next time in Rabat, in Morocco. Thank you again.
Thanks a lot.
So let's proceed with our next speaker, Dr. George Pereira, who is Principal Officer at the European Commission. He will be talking about 5G for CAM. So I don't know if George is connected.
Yes, but I cannot share.
I probably, yeah.
I am trying to stop that.
Okay.
I'm trying to, okay, I found it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Can you see my screen? Yes, I hope so.
Okay, so the screen is yours. You can start.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for the kind invitation to participate, namely to Latif. It's always a pleasure. My name is Jorge Pereira from the European Commission. I'm Principal Scientific Officer, and I'm responsible for the areas of 5G for connected and automated mobility, and public protection and disaster relief, and also for optical wireless convergence and IPv6. It's really my pleasure to address you and provide the context for the ongoing effort towards deploying 5G for connected automated mobility across Europe. Obviously, cybersecurity and trust, elements of this conference are critical in this priority, even if our projects have really not focused much on such aspects. The focus has been in the first phase mainly on technical challenges. I will then briefly address 5G for connected and automated mobility, moving towards deployment. I will apologize, but I have to cut the video because my bandwidth is not very great, so I apologize for that. Let me then move to the next slide. Briefly, the outline, I will talk about the 5G action plan. So the policy mandate to deploy 5G across Europe, focusing on trials, early deployments, and cross-border corridors. I will briefly present ongoing activities in the area of 5G for connected automated mobility through the Horizon 2020 projects, and the evolution now towards deploying 5G everywhere using the CEF2 digital program, namely the context of 5G corridors, again, across Europe. And I will come to some conclusions. Again, it's my pleasure to be here, and let me jump directly into the European 5G action plan. The European Commission launched in 2016 the 5G action plan, which was approved by the member states with concrete goals in terms of trials and early deployment towards pervasive coverage by 2025, focusing on where people live and on major transport paths, and now full coverage by 2030. 5G is part of the broadband priority. The 5G action plan was part of the 2016 telecom package, which included as well the communication on towards the European Gigabit Society. So the European Gigabit Society is to be seen in parallel with the 5G deployment. 5G is for wireless connectivity, and the Gigabit Society focuses more on the backbone aspects and broadband connectivity across Europe. This was complemented in March 2021 by a communication called the 2030 Digital Compass, opening the way for a digital decade. The ambitions were increased, and all European households will be covered by a gigabit network, with all populated areas covered by 5G. Again, we are here contrasting the broadband access with the wireless 5G access across Europe. We expect pan-European deployments of 5G corridors for connected and automated mobility and advanced digital rail operations, which will contribute to road safety and Green Deal objectives. So the 5G action plan enhanced aims at covering all main transport corridors, not only roads. Again, the rail aspect was emphasized by 2025. moving towards 5G everywhere by 2030. This requires an even more aggressive rollout with broad geographical and sectorial focus. I would like to recall the numbers that were mentioned in the previous presentation, where there were, I would say, quite optimistic and even impressive figures in terms of network deployments across the world. If you look at Europe, there is a very number of networks. There is clear competition on the 5G market, but this somehow hides the issue that rural areas, and in particular those areas near the borders, are not yet properly covered. And without expectation in terms of return on investment, it is not likely that the markets will address these, again, rural, mostly rural border areas. And that's why the effort was put on the so-called cross-border corridors. Cross-border corridors mean that we will have to provide 5G coverage of the border areas across Europe to ensure continuous service delivery. This represents a major effort to prepare the grounds for subsequent deployment of CAM across all major transport paths. We launched the first call in November 2018, and the result were 3 cross-border corridors: the 5G Carment, the Brenner corridor from Germany through Austria to Italy, the 5G Kroku, the French, Luxembourg, Germany triangle, and 5G Mobix, which included 2 corridors, the Portuguese-Spanish corridor and a Greek-Turk corridor. This last one is slightly different in the sense that this includes a hard border, okay? This is a hard border with a non-EU country. The three projects, which represent a combined EU funding of 63 million euros, cover very distinct scenarios, cover over 1,000 kilometers of highways, and they include 8 borders, okay? A second batch of projects was launched in September 2020, the 5G Blueprint, the Belgium-Netherlands corridor in the North Sea, the 5G routes, the Baltic corridor from Finland, Estonia, and Latvia to Lithuania, and the 5G Med, the Spanish-French corridor. They represent a combined funding of 31 million euros, and again, quite distinct scenarios, and including 5 borders. Through it all. An additional rail project was launched in November 2020 with 10 million euros funding. So if we take into consideration other CAM-related projects, besides the 105 million euros on cross-border corridor projects, we have in the 5G PPP advanced pilot projects, a number of them with transport and mobility, both automotive and rail focus. And this represents around 45 million euros funding. So overall, we have invested 150 million euros EU funding in 5G for CAM related research in the context of Horizon 2020. But as I said, the priority has been shifted towards trying to deliver or aiming at delivering 5G everywhere across Europe. The EU funding of 5G corridors, we started in Horizon 2020 from large-scale testing and pre-deployment analysis, and we are now moving with CEF2 Digital to large-scale deployment across Europe. We had, as I said, 5 million euros on large-scale testing in Horizon 2020, and in the context of the CEF2 Digital, we are aiming at large-scale deployment, and we are going to invest around 1 billion euros. So this is a 1 order of magnitude increase in investment because we are moving, as I said, from trials and large-scale testing into actual large-scale deployment across Europe. To these 1 billion euros, we are going to add additional public funding sources, including from the EIB, European Investment Bank, besides national and even regional funds in the context of the CRF. In all of this, obviously, we see private investment as the main source of funding for this. So this 1 billion euros now is to supplement funding from private entities. We want to use this to accelerate deployment. As I said, the question here is a question of slow or no return on investment in these border areas. And through this investment, we mean to facilitate and promote and accelerate the deployment in these areas, which will then provide additional economic benefits. In conclusion, with the objective of enabling and empowering verticals, and in particular 5G for connected and automated mobility, and accelerated the deployment of services they need and also the services they want to provide, verticals need to test and validate their prototypes, solutions, products in real-world scenarios. Federated test beds open to experimentation and eventually to pilots are critical to the involvement of sector players to set these requirements is essential. In the case of connected and automated mobility, many sectors are involved, and infrastructure and test beds go well beyond connectivity. Obviously, it is clear that the road component is an essential one, but also the vehicles themselves. I'm hopeful that in spite of the COVID pandemic and the ensuing economic crisis, the technical efforts will continue and the necessary investments will be conjured to deliver 5G everywhere, even in these sparsely populated, remote, peripheral areas. The Commission has already invested, as I said, around 150 million euros in 5G for CAM. And as I mentioned before, we are moving decisively from an initial focus on automotive towards mobility across the board. Our current projects already cover rail, waterways, and ports, including barges, and coastal maritime, including ferries. The upcoming 5G corridors will be able to target all major transport paths as intended from the beginning, making the most of a common, expanding, and evolving 5G infrastructure. Okay, I recall the number of releases and their planned deployment that we have just heard talking about. We want to mutualize current and planned investment on 5G to deliver, namely for 5G for connected and automated mobility. The Commission aims at investing 1 billion euros, around 1 billion euros in the near future towards large-scale deployment of 5G for CAM along corridors. But many challenges remain. Okay? As I said, the main focus in Horizon 2020 has been on the technical challenges to deliver service continuity across borders. We need to address many remaining challenges, and this will be done in the context of the 6G SNS joint initiative. Let me be very clear. These technical challenges are not just operational. They are just not merely technical details. They are, in some sense, basic technological questions that need to be addressed in the context of these SNS work programs. And with this, I thank you for your attention, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, George, for the insightful talk. Well, we are short of time. I'm sorry. Probably we have to proceed with the next talk. But anyway, I think if anybody has any question, they can probably just reach out to George by
yes.
email. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So please feel free to contact me.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
So, George, if you can just stop sharing your screen.
Indeed.
Okay,
Thank you.
So we move now to our next speaker, Rick Kuhn, who is a computer scientist in the Computer Security Division at NIST, USA. We'll be talking about reductible DLT with Hyperledger Fabric. So without further ado, I leave the screen to Rick.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen. Good. Okay, is the screen on now? Okay, very good. So first of all, thank you especially to Latif and the organizing committee for the opportunity to speak today. I hope you'll find this interesting. Some of the things that I'd like to point out here, the talk that I'm going to give is about redactable distributed ledger technology. So by redactable, we're referring to the ability to change or delete a block of data. And the reasons for that are associated with privacy and security. And this is distributed ledger technology, so blockchain is one form of distributed ledger. This is a little bit beyond conventional blockchain, which you'll see in a few minutes. And it has been implemented in Hyperledger Fabric. So this makes it accessible for many applications that have been done with Hyperledger, and we look forward to being able to incorporate those without too many changes. So the main points of this talk, the first thing, and we're going to keep coming back to this, is that for many applications, we don't really need all of the features of blockchain. In particular, blockchain immutability, which is very valuable and essential for a lot of applications. But for some uses, it is a problem. It is a problem with respect to privacy and for exception or error handling in some cases. So what we can do is do something a little bit different, which we call a data block matrix. And what this gives you is the distributed trust and the integrity protection of a blockchain, but it also allows for controlled edits for privacy or corrections of errors. And we've made this a component that can be just a simple drop-in component for Hyperledger Fabric existing applications so that the application requires little or no change to use this new feature. So this is sort of a hypothetical view of the range of applications for distributed ledger technology. So blockchain is, of course, designed for cryptocurrency, works very well for cryptocurrency. That's this small circle in the middle. But then it can also be applied to a lot of distributed systems. However, a lot of the research that you see on applying blockchain to other distributed systems beyond cryptocurrency, a lot of the research is directed towards basically ways of getting around or avoiding the built-in blockchain properties. So what we'll talk about today are some things that can be done to make the basic blockchain technology of distributed trust available to a larger range of systems, in particular providing privacy and error or exception management. So why would we want this ability to change or delete blocks? Why would we want that for error handling? Well, in one particular point, blockchain looks like a good application for logistics, but it turns out to be very difficult in practice. There's a popular investment news site called Motley Fool, and this is an article just a couple of months ago. You can see the title right here. This could be the end of enterprise blockchain. What they're referring to is the shutdown of the TradeLens application that was developed by IBM and I believe Maersk Shipping. Because there are problems in making it available for users, and it's difficult to use for a lot of companies. So this is another very recent article referring to a survey of 750 logistics executives, and this is beyond, this is more than just distributed ledger, but in general digitalization, they're referring to the problems that occur with exception handling. So that's one issue, but the biggest issue is for retractable distributed ledger is for privacy applications. So as you know, the blockchain contents are immutable, unchangeable, permanent, and that can conflict with the right to erasure of privacy regulations such as the European GDPR, and that this regulation and many others like it around the world make it possible or require that a user be able to have their data deleted on request. So personal data is defined as basically any information that can be traced to an identifiable person, natural person. And of course, that's a lot of that data is what blockchains were designed for. So even if you have pseudo-anonymized data, then the user can still request that that data be deleted. And this can even be something that is indirectly traced to the user. A lot of US states are beginning to adopt these same sort of rules. And law enforcement in various nations may also require the deletion of data, for example, if it's a youth offender in some cases. So there are approaches for trying to solve this conflict between privacy and blockchain immutability. One of the most common recommendations is this. People will say, well, don't put private data on the blockchain. The problem there is that, of course, as noted, pseudo-anonymized data is still considered personal, even if it's something as indirect as a dynamic IP address that can be traced back to that user at a particular time. And then the other point is, of course, that blockchains are typically used in financial transactions, and that is obviously personal data. Another approach recommended is to encrypt data and then destroy the key in order to make that data inaccessible. The problem there is that if we're dealing with privacy-sensitive data, then that means it has to be kept secure or private for decades or possibly forever. And the history of cryptography is that cryptography systems will tend to be weakened or broken over time. That's why the original data encryption standard that NIST released had to be replaced in only 17 years. So if you were relying on something like that to make keep data private, then 17 years from now, that data may become public. So that would be a problem. And of course, we're seeing quantum computing, which puts public key systems at risk. So that's another consideration, making this approach somewhat less than perfect. So the most common approach for providing a redactable or editable blockchain is what's called a chameleon hash function. The idea there is to generate a collision where we have the data changing, but keep the hash the same. And of course, this requires a specialized hash function, but it can be used with a standard blockchain. What we're doing is something sort of the opposite of that, maybe. We have two hash lists to provide the integrity protection, and we can use a standard hash function. So the SHA-256 is commonly used, for example. Now, we're not saying that this is the best approach for all cases. It's just like any other engineering problem. There are trade-offs in what should be used for different types of applications. So a lot of blockchain applications, as we pointed out earlier, really don't need blockchain. They just need some blockchain features. So what we're going to do is apply 2 hash values per block instead of a single linked chain. And of course, there are some Java and Go code examples available, and this has been incorporated into an access control system, which we don't have time to talk about today, but there's some good information on our website about that. So the constraints and the assumptions developed for this, first is we want to allow hash integrity protection, so we protect the integrity of the data to ensure that it's unchanged. And this gives us distributed trust and makes auditing and accountability very easy, as you can do in blockchain. And of course, we have a shared view. That is another key feature, especially for applications such as logistics, where we want to make the integrity of the data secure, but also allow a shared view of it. This was designed for permissioned or private distributed ledger systems, such as supply chain and so on. So it's not exciting like cryptocurrency, but very, very valuable economically. And so that's what we're really trying to do, is improve the functioning of a lot of distributed systems. So just to get into how it works, what we have done is simply provide hash function or hash values for every row and column of a matrix. So in this case, we have a row, every row here has a hash value, these H values. Every column has a hash value. And then each block, for example, this one, each block within the matrix is protected by 2 hash values. And this one by this one, and this value here. And again, this is for permissioned distributed system or distributed ledger systems. So if we wanted to delete this block, then that would change this hash value, and it would change this hash value, but the other values are not affected. So as we delete this one, then the other values in this are protected, and we can guarantee that they are unchanged when this is deleted. And then, of course, these would be recomputed after that's done. Now, the structure, as shown earlier, that's in a matrix, 2-dimensional form. We can also extend this to multiple dimensions, or however many we want. This is just a visualization of how it would be extended to 3 dimensions. In that case, we get 6 sectors of different values. So why would we want to do this? Well, again, many blockchain applications only need some features of the blockchain function. So what we can do is, by providing the valuable features for distributed systems, but avoiding the problem of immutability, then we can make blockchain or distributed ledger systems, in this case, apply to a larger variety of systems. And that, again, allows for privacy, meeting privacy regulations, and for error handling. We can also replace network communications because we have local data in every node. You could do this, of course, with conventional database functions, nothing new there, but this gives us additional integrity checks and gives us the distributed trust that we need in a lot of applications. And this is designed, again, to be just a simple, easy-to-use component that gives you the features that you might want for distributed ledger, but avoids the problem with privacy. We don't need to get into the details of this particular chart here, but the key point here is that this is a decision flow chart. A lot of people have this sort of thing. These are conditions that you really need to have met to, to use a blockchain. So what this block matrix function does is basically remove a couple of these conditions. So again, it's making distributed ledger available to a larger range of applications. So this is designed to use the existing Hyperledger API as closely as possible. You can add blocks in the same way that you would using Hyperledger. And they're configurable by channel. Is the volume okay? I heard some feedback there. Okay, very good. Okay, so Hyperledger uses the concept of channel, which simply means a private subnet. And so we can make this feature configurable by channel. If you want, you can have a single deployment that uses multiple channels so that one can use blockchain and the other can use this block matrix function. And we have a website that shows where the code involved right here. This is just what we've tried to do. So again, we have an application that may be designed for Hyperledger Fabric, and that can be used with no change by using this new block matrix function in a single module that's been modified. And we can, in some cases, we may want to have calls within the API within the application to do the changes or updates, or you could conceivably do the changes and updates offline so that the application could be used with no change at all. That is the approach, and it seems to be working nicely. So quick comparison. With both of these, we have distributed trust, and we have integrity protection through hashing, same as blockchain. But with blockchain, we have immutable, unchangeable, permanent records. With this function, we allow the possibility of changing or deleting records. And these can be used both on Hyperledger at the same time, as noted. So that, again, we're trying to make this a component that can be used by distributed system designers to enlarge the range of applications for distributed ledger and distributed trust. So far, the most interesting application seems to be in clinical trials for pharmaceuticals. And we have a couple of things discussing this. An upcoming healthcare information management systems. This is a huge conference that's held every year. We will have some of our people presenting this work there. Also, there's a new publication which will be coming out in an issue this year of the ACM Distributed Ledger Technologies Journal describing some of this work. So for more information, we have websites right here. We have the first describes the distributed ledger technology, and the second is the deals with the code and how to access that. So hope we've caught up a little bit on time. Welcome any questions, and of course feel free to email me or my colleagues for more information. We have all of those access on this website right here. So thank you. And I'll stop the screen share.
Thank you, Rick, for that excellent presentation. Just a little kind of point you're mentioning when you talk about not fixed IP addresses but dynamic. So when it is dynamic, it means that you have between 65,000 addresses to 16 million addresses. So basically, it's very hard to pinpoint the person who is using that IP address. So instead of saying it's dynamic, you should say constant IP address. That's the the jargon of the ITF. Now that's for the IPv4 addresses. For the IPv6 addresses, you can use the privacy address. Then in this case, they will not find your MAC address. Then you're safe. Huh? Okay. That's a little detail, which can maybe put some. At least you will not get an ITF hacker to go after you. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, that was the point there was simply just to bring up, I think it was an EU ruling that said that if the person can be identified in any way, even indirectly, so yes, it would be more difficult possibly in some cases to identify someone that way, but the key point there was simply that if there's any way to even indirectly identify a person, then that is still considered private data.
Yeah, that's correct. So Europol has requested that, at least for Belgium, to reduce the number of IP addresses shared to 12. In this case, you have 12 chances to get the guy. Anything beyond is, you might go after innocent people, which is not the purpose of the exercise. But otherwise, I have obviously Owen for a discussion on the same item as well. Let me pass him to you.
Good.
Hi Rick, this is Owen Vaughan from nChain, and I have a personal interest in this because I've done some research on how to redact public blockchains like Bitcoin, and as you know, the challenge there is if you remove any data from a transaction, how do you know that the remaining data is sound? How do you reproduce the transaction ID? And the approach we used was to use zero knowledge proofs to do that, and we have quite a cool working demo on that. So I'd love to share that with you at some time. But I'm curious to know more about the block data matrix proposal. So does this mean you're kind of proposing a new type of consensus mechanism? Or put it another way, is this compatible with any of the existing consensus mechanisms we know, like proof of work or proof of stake?
It could be used, you could use that sort of consensus mechanism, but in this case, what we've done is modify only the one component of Hyperledger. So basically, whatever is being used in the Hyperledger application, if you applied this work, then you would basically inherit that consensus that was already being used by the Hyperledger application.
I see, because Hyperledger, the framework is modular, so you're just changing one of these modules and it doesn't affect the consensus mechanism, something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Yeah,
we wanted to make this as easy to use as possible so that if you have existing applications, you don't need to change them or would require very minimal changes.
Yeah, I really like that approach where you're trying to change as little as possible and to make it slot in. And I wonder, has this been coded up and prototyped?
Yes, it is working. We have a working demo, and there is a company that is using this and incorporating it into their work. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say the name of the company because NIST, of course, is a U.S. government agency, and we have all sorts of rules. But yes, it is available, and we have it built into Hyperledger now.
Okay, thank you. Just a final question. Does it open up any new attack vectors?
Oh, everything opens up new attack vectors. So that's something that we want to look at. We don't think it makes a huge difference with what's existing in Hyperledger. So, for example, the performance aspects are comparable to Hyperledger with the existing channels. I would say we don't see any immediate additional attack vectors. But just as a general matter of course, you always have to be concerned about that sort of thing. After all, I'm from the computer security division, so that's something we are very concerned about.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. It's always a great pleasure listening to you, and I would highly encourage that you talk to Owen about this, because the two of you are some of the best experts on blockchain. So we'll have you on the next call, next conference, the two of you again, to see what kind of progress you have made in this. So thank you very much. So I would like to invite the next speaker, and he's already on. That's Monsieur Bernard Duval from MyTax in Canada. That's from Montreal, Quebec. So
exactly.
Thank you for confirming. So, you know, I leave the stage to you. So let's see. Rick, can you please release the screen now? If you can find the button.
Oh, I thought that I already released it.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. I didn't see that. So,
oh, good,
wonderful.
good.
Yes, Bernard.
So are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Full length?
Yeah, we see you and your nice picture too. Go ahead.
All right. So nice everyone to see you. I wish I was with you today. It snowed for 2 weeks here. So every day there's a tractor shoveling the snow so we get our vehicles out of the house. So I guess it's quite a different temperature we have. So, but maybe next time. So before I start my presentation in English, I would like to say a few words in French for those for the French-speaking community. So I'll be right back. Just take a few seconds. Bear with me, please. Alors bonjour à tout le monde de la communauté francophone. Mon nom est Bernard Duval. Je suis basé à Montréal, au Canada. Et je suis conseiller senior chez Mitax. Puis dans le fond, le message, c'est que je vous invite à me contacter si vous avez des projets en français, vous voulez discuter, échanger, etc. Donc, I'm back in English. I'll do the presentation. Basically, I invited the French community to contact me if they wanted to discuss and share ideas. Okay, so let's start this. So today, I would like to talk with, so it won't be too technical, right? So I think there's a lot of smart, great minds who presented on the topics today. I would like to present you some opportunities of collaboration between our countries in terms of research, collaborative research. After that, what Mitax have been doing in the field of 5G, 6G, blockchain, cybersecurity more specifically, and digital trust, and finally explore some international collaboration. So about what is Mitax? I'm sure most of you don't know about Mitax. So we empower, the purpose of Mitax is to empower Canadian innovation through partnerships that deliver solutions to our most pressing problems. We drive economic growth, productivity, and meaningful change to improve quality of life for all Canadians. And this is not only in telecom and next-gen technologies, it's all disciplines you will find in universities, including human resources, social innovation, and so on. Our mission is to catalyze force in the Canadian innovation ecosystem, including also international collaboration. We cannot do this alone. We will build a world-class, diverse community of innovators through our collaborative model. So that's what we do. That's how we do it. It's a collaborative model. Attracting and deploying top talent to the industry and matching need with expertise to create ambitious solutions to real-world challenges. Our vision is quite simple. Canadian innovation will create change that transforms the world. So that's my little speech here. We always thank our funding partners. So Mitax is a not-for-profit, and we're funded by the Canadian government, the federal government, and all provinces across the country. So many of you might say, what is Mitax doing to support innovation and deliver on the mission? It's very simple when you think about it. So what we do, we're funding collaborative research between the industry and the academic. You need the basic unit at Mitax, it's one researcher / student / fellow, one professor or supervisor, 4 months of work, and a private company, a partner company. Can be a not-for-profit, can be a private company, it can be also an hospital or a municipality. All this costs $15,000 for 4 months. The private company pays half of it, and my tax pays the other half. Sometimes we also incorporated other government funding to leverage this, but that's the basic of it. On the right side, you take that small cube, and a research project can become a multi-million-dollar research project, multi-professor, multi-universities, multi-companies. It's limitless what we can do. For my tax, what's important is not to have a large project. It's only to really focus and target the real challenges of a company or a researcher. So this being said, a few numbers about my tax. So since 2008, it's more than 80,000 internships that we funded. Just last year, so my tax is growing rapidly. It was nearly 20,000 internships just for last year, and we keep grow. We'll be over 20,000 this year. More than 12,000 researchers / professors from 81 universities across the country. More than 100 post-secondary partners in Canada, and more than 8,000 industry partners worked with my tax, leveraging our expertise and funding. So far, in 10 years, more than 35,000 research projects were completed, and more than $885 million Canadian dollars invested during that time. Right now, the pool of funding we have is about $1 billion on top of the 885. That's for 5 years. And that $1 billion is used to conduct collaborative research projects in all disciplines. So I mentioned in the introduction, we also cover social innovation, human resources, any discipline in universities. Personally, I focus on new technologies, the next gen, including 5G, 6G, blockchain, cybersecurity, and digital trust. So that is about my tax. So how we deliver that collaborative work? Well, we have colleagues across the country. So in each universities, we have at least one colleague working, or their office, their desk actually is with the research office. And their role is to manage the request, the funding, but also to discuss with the professor to support them in their research activities. So we can say when we meet Canadian companies or international companies or researchers want to address a challenge, well, we have access to top 5G, 6G, and blockchain researchers in Canada. Same for cybersecurity, same for AI, quantum, Web 3.0, and so on and so on. So that's what we do. So I mentioned there was also, it's a matching between academic and the industry. Well, we conduct research in these fields with VMware, with Ciena, Ericsson, Expo, IBM, Nokia, Samsung, Thales, and so on. So there's more large companies. And the reason I use large company is simple. Everybody knows them. But in Canada, we work with thousands of SMEs, small businesses and startups. So Canada is well known for SMEs. Most of the employment is in this field, and we have some creative, quite creative startups in the next-gen technologies field. Okay. So my tax and 5G, 6G, and so on, all the next-gen technologies, what it is about, what we do. Well, when I joined in 2019, was that because a lot of those companies I mentioned were already working with top researchers in Canada. So I proposed that we would create a 5G team back in 2019. And one reason was that because we had a very successful Canadian program, a test bed on 5G. Some of you might know Encore. It's a 5G test bed where all researchers and companies, Canadian companies, had access and could conduct testing and research on a real live 5G testbed. So we've decided to create that 5G team. We had a lot of traction, and rapidly the other technologies, we all wanted to work together. So we became the Future Networks team. We had an extension to cover all Canada. So today we cover the international country, and also we work with international partners. Today we're putting in place phase 2 of 5G. So for any initiative in Europe and other countries, of course, we're more than interested to connect our testbed, but also our knowledge and investment. And we also started a 6G initiative. So MyTax is at the forefront of a Canadian 6G strategy, and we work with, it's driven by the academic, but we also have industries involved. So some of the pictures there have been taken at the IEEE Future Networks World Forum last year in October in Montreal. So what we do with IEEE, a few words on that. I think since we're guests of IEEE today, so last October in Montreal, there was that forum. We conduct MyTax led a 6G summit where we actually welcome international partners, European Commission, Korea, Japan, the NSF, and US, to discuss. So Canada is not first in that race in terms of 6G, but we wanted to welcome and listen to the experience. So all morning, we had the chance to exchange with international partners, and then in the afternoon, we asked the questions to leaders in Canada, what Canada should do. And international partners were invited, and at the end of the day, we tackled a few lines where there would be collaboration. And one thing that is for sure, all countries and regions wanted to work together. There was also, we took the opportunity, thanks to IEEE, a lot of Koreans were in Canada, so we did a Korea-Canada get-together, or a mini-summit, and we put in place potential collaboration between Canada, US, and Korea. There's other stuff that were done. We also managed the OGA Summit. It was 10 panels on many subjects. It was a great success, very interesting, and that is just one item. We had blind researchers, very touching, very amazing, and that is becoming and getting a lot of attraction, that vision, using AI, using technology to help blind people. And that is conducted with University of Montreal, McGill, Yvette Do, the leader in AI in Montreal, and of course MyTax, and there's not-for-profit and SMEs attached to it. So I'm showing this to you to show that Canada is very active, and MyTax plays an important role in this field. A few words about Encore. I did mention to you about Encore. So it's a 5G testbed that ended last year in 2022. That was 5 years of research. It's 400 million that was invested by the federal government, the two provinces of Ontario and Quebec, Ericsson, Ciena, Thales, IBM, and CGI. They actually built the testbed, and 800 small companies had access to that testbed. 400 million invested, I said so already. Just in Quebec, just in one province, there was 1,000 internships, which represented 500 students. So that was great success. Right now, MyTax is working with the team to have Encore 2.0. So that will be for the next 5 years. So Jean-Pierre, if you see any opportunities to connect with Europe, we're ready to talk. You don't know that, but I'm trying to switch my my document. Here it is. I won. We're also working on SINGS. So when I told you about that international panel where we welcomed international leaders in October in Montreal last year, we worked on that 6G strategy. And we came up with 4 important pillars, which are trustworthiness, resilience, and cybersecurity of networks, universal access, technologies for good and for all, sustainability of future networks, infrastructure, deserved industries, and finally, intelligent networks, or AI, and sensible infrastructure. So those targeted pillars will be the base of our the Canadian 6G strategy. And one thing that was discussed is, let's tackle where Canada is very strong, and we're going to work with other countries with their strengths, and then we can exchange. So that's how we started discussions with the US, with the NSF, Korea, Japan, UK, and the European Commission. So in light blue, those are some priorities for Canada where we have some strength. So quantum computing, but also quantum networks. We actually have a test bed, a quantum network test bed that is under construction right now. Satellites communication, computer science, telecom, and so on, and some social innovation priorities for Canada and MITACs, namely Indigenous leadership in all this initiative, focusing on talent pool to make sure we develop the next generation of talent, so that's a top priority. Social innovation, make sure that, you know, technologies are really for good and for all, so putting that priority right at the beginning of the strategy makes it possible. And finally, EDI, the EDI strategies that most countries are sharing. A few words about AI. So many of you, I'm sure, heard about the leadership of Montreal in AI. So we have a lot of bright minds teaching here, international researchers who are based here. Great startups. Most universities have large capacities in AI. And for MITACs, it's very important. So there's a lot of funding, a lot of resources invested in there, and that is good to leverage our capacity. When we talk about 5G, 6G, blockchain, and so on, we see the value of having access to this great pool of experts, right? Just an example of what MITACs is doing right now with MasterCard. So MasterCard chose Canada to conduct a first research project. So they invested $500,000 for a cybersecurity research. MITACs is putting at least $500,000. So we have $1 million just to start there. And there will be probably more initiatives in cybersecurity. You should know that the banking system in Canada is special. There's not many banks, but they're very strong. Their presence is very large. Now they're more present in the US and other countries. But basically, it's few banks, but very strong, very well established. A few words on NGI, I'm sure that Latif knows well. Actually, Latif introduced me to NGI. It's a European Commission initiative. They are funding, they're paying for fellows to conduct research projects and work in Canada and in the US. So MITACs is representing NGI just to show how involved MITACs is in the ecosystem. Along with, you know, collaboration with IEEE, but also the regions like the European Commission and this great program. So very easy. You need a host in both countries, in Canada and US. In Canada, we have already 4 great universities: ETS, Dalhousie, Concordia, and Dawson College. We have VMware, Sienna, and Ericsson who are interested to act as host companies, and there's more that are interested. The big kickoff is really in May at the boot camp in Rome. So for those who will be present, I will be there representing Canada and presenting what they can expect, so what the fellows can expect when they arrive in Canada to conduct their research. So if you're interested, I invite you to find the website NGI Enrichers Stress and Plastic. That's a great demonstration of collaboration between regions, namely North America and Europe.
Recording in progress.
So that's good. We'll have the recording of the last slide. I can redo it some other time. So the message here, before I say thank you and it was great, just want to say Canada, MyTax is having a great infrastructure for the research. We have great minds in research and we welcome international collaboration with you people, participants today. Reach out to me. If you already know researchers, well, reach out to them. Talk about MyTax. If you don't, we can help you connect with researchers or companies. If you know companies who want to work on both, on more than one countries and have labs connections and so on. I showed you Ericsson. Ericsson, one of their AI labs is in Montreal, and they love that we connect with them with other companies, with other countries and so on. So there's really a great camaraderie. The ecosystem is very active, very open in Canada. So we really welcome you to connect with us, to learn about, the funding. We have the collaboration opportunities with small players, big players, everybody. And of course, Canada is interested about, your initiatives and see how we can connect. Alors, je veux vous dire merci, un grand merci pour l'invitation, Latif, et à tous les organisateurs. J'ai vu quelques présentations avant, c'était très intéressant. So big thank you, Latif, and the organizers. Very interesting. I saw some of the presentation today when I woke up a few hours ago. So very interesting, and I wish you a nice end of day. Thank you. If you have any questions, we can ask now or just connect with me later. I'll be happy.
Merci Bernard. À la prochaine fois. It was very nice of you of mentioning the NGI Enrichers project. As a matter of fact, Morocco is also partner in this. So your call to get some of the people to apply for 3 or 6 months in the US or Canada are very welcome. But they will have to go through a selection process. I guess the next call is going to happen. Probably some of the names are going to be published in Rome sometime in, I think in May. Or May, yes. I think May 15th or something like that. Okay, so thanks, and wishing you a lot of sunshine in Montreal.
Sunshine is coming in, I would say, 2 months.
Oh, that's
the snow will go away. We have flowers and birds. So if you want to come in May. May is beautiful.
That's why
April is risky.
That's why they call you snowbirds.
Or if you like snow. If you like snow, I'm waiting for you.
Yeah, we need it here. We've got some snow here, but we need rather rain, which is very much appreciated by the culture. Now, I will pass on, thank you very much. I'll pass on the presentation of the next speaker, and I see him there already. So if we have the logistics ready.
Silak, you lag. You hear me? Hello.
Are you calling me?
Yeah, nice.
Okay. Yeah. This is Selçuk. Yeah, I'm the next speaker. So I guess we're skipping the break, right? According to the schedule.
Exactly. Skipping the break. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I can get started then.
Thank you. You can share your screen.
Yeah. Let me share my screen. Okay, perfect. Here we go.
Yes, nice. I am very happy to present our speaker, Professor Ieee Silak from University of Florida, USA. Professor Selek is working on, especially in cybersecurity and IoT systems. Now, the presentation entitled Security and Privacy of IoT Apps and Devices. The floor is yours, Professor.
Thank you for the invitation. And then warm welcome. I'm a professor here in Miami, located in Florida, US. I'm in Florida International University. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys, all of you. I personally visited Morocco last semester. I've been really impressed by the great research my colleagues have been doing there. So it's really an honor to be here with you guys right now. I want to first of all mention that we have a lot of sunny days, guys, in Florida. Okay, you can go to Canada for snow, but you can also come down to Florida for sun and the beaches, which I will have some more updates for you towards the end. So anyway, the security and privacy of IoT apps and devices is the topic of my, basically the talk today. The views expressed in this talk and slides are only my views. They don't represent any agencies or any, it's only educational purposes. So if you need to contact me for the slides, I'd be happy to share them with you. And if you have any feedback, I'm also happy to. And you can see my email and my contact information on every slide, and at the end as well, you'll be able to see. So today I'll be talking to you about, some of you know very well my research. I've been focusing lately on IoT and CPS security and privacy topics. And we have had really great publications in top tier venues like Usenix Security, NDSS, IEEE TIFS, IEEE TMC, and so on. So today I'm going to be giving you some sample research activities and interesting results that are also have future applications. The first one is securing the sensors on the IoT devices and CPS devices. And the second one is a topic that is never getting old, but it's very interesting when it applied to the IoT settings, is fingerprinting. The third one, we are looking at the security of the apps ecosystem, how they are leaking information to other third parties, the apps. So I'm going to share some of those. And then the last and the greatest work that we've been doing is cryptojacking. Cryptojacking is illegal Bitcoin mining, which basically means that you think that your computing resources are actually challenged, and maybe you hear a lot of noise and CPU noise or memory, etc. It's getting, your computing resources are getting crazy. You think, oh, maybe it may be part of an illegal Bitcoin mining operations that bad guys are doing. So, with all due respect, I would like to also do my self-advertisement of my institution. Florida International University is the fourth largest university in the US in terms of population. And we are R1, we are in the same category as Carnegie Mellon and Georgia Tech. So we have more than 200 programs, and then we have, every year so many hundreds of patents productions, and our rankings are really good. We are pushing the boundaries in the top 50, and it's a very interesting ecosystem. Myself, I moved about 8 years ago from Georgia Tech. I was a research faculty there. Before I was a senior security engineer at Symantec. Symantec is the maker of Norton antivirus. Maybe you can you can know about that. Before that, I was at Carnegie Mellon. I'm directing the cybersecurity physical system lab. I have trained about 70 students in my lab, and several postdocs and several PhD students, undergrads and master students. They were all hired, and some of them really hired by top companies like Google, MIT Lincoln Lab. And we have had, very, big success about fundraising. As of today, we've been able to raise more than $18 million in the last 7.5 years since I moved to FIU. So what are we working on in this? We're working on IoT and cyber physical systems, but our approach is really hands-on. We work on real problems with the devices. So this is the environment that students would be able to work and are working. So as you see, we have the devices and they apply their solutions and theories in a realistic environment. Here in this, in the last 2 years, we built this IoT security lab. And this is my colleague from Microsoft, and they donated a significant amount of money. So we have so many smart devices, IoT devices in this lab where students had a chance to work on these devices. As I said, we had so many great student success stories. So let's focus on today's talk, right? There are so many security challenges when I look at the ecosystem. When you look at these IoT devices, smart devices, they are leaking information, and I'm sure you may have heard of this, Amazon Alexa, it's listening to the medium when you think that it's not listening. The drones, handheld drones are being taken down. They are being taken down by sending inaudible, sound waves to the drones. So there are so many challenges out there that's happening. So what we observed here is that, excuse me, overall, when we look at it, devices are predictable in their activities, and sensors on board can be easily abused and hacked. And in fact, when you look at the software and hardware of these emerging devices, they are not really cognizant of the threats that would be coming from the sensors themselves. There may be so many compromised devices. As you know, today, not any single device is manufactured or built in one country alone. And so this, makes a lot of challenging stories in terms of the supply chain and security of supply chain. Sensitive information can be leaked to third parties. There are multiple devices, multiple users, but simple security solutions. The ecosystem is really not ready for the real users that are using the applications in a smart home or smart office or so I'll be giving you some examples of these throughout my talk. So the first one is securing against sensor channels, sensor-based attacks to IoT and CPS systems. This was a study that I started in 2013-14 timeframe. It was the basis of my NSF Career Award. NSF Career Award, some of you may know, it's one of the prestigious awards in the US given to early scientists. It's like the Marie Curie Fellowship in Europe circles. So what we studied here is that you see all these different applications. Today, it's really hard to find any single IoT device, CPS device, any device that is interacting with the physical world that doesn't have any sensors on it. Like, for example, here you have the Predator drone, and the Predator drone has the sensor ball. And this also another drone. And here you have the smart home, the intelligent traffic management systems, or a medical environment, or a smartwatch. They all have at least 5 or 6 sensors, accelerometer, gyroscope, and light sensors, infrared sensors. So what we said that basically, hey, there are these sensors, but nobody is really protecting these sensors. They put the Norton antivirus, McAfee antivirus on these devices, and they say that, hey, we are protected against the cybersecurity threats. But in fact, they are only protecting themselves against the threats that are coming from the internet. So in fact, interacting with the the physical world itself can pose security challenges. So we will focus on this. And interestingly, we looked at different mobile operating systems, including Android, Apple, BlackBerry, and Windows. What we have noticed was really interesting. So you could install an app. You can say, hey, I want to give a permission to this app, and this app will use the microphone. But in fact, when you give the permission to use the microphone, it also automatically pulls down other sensors' permissions automatically. So we, basically noticed this, problem, and then what we did, we created and we enumerated what would be formally the problems related to this, basically. So we saw that you could trigger a malware via the sensors, you can leak the information via the sensors, or you can steal the, an information using these sensors from the device. So there's a demo I'm not going to show you because of the time constraints that we have. But if you're interested in it, I'd be happy to share the slide, and then you can go ahead and then you can see here my students basically showing how if light sensors could be triggering an attack on the smartwatch of this other person. Anyway, so we noticed this, identified this problem, unique problem, and then we were also interested in providing a solution to this interesting problem, which we called a 6-cent framework. What we did is basically we had 3 phases: data collection, data processing, and data analysis. And we employed different machine learning algorithms focusing on primarily Markov chain. And the other neighbors and others were only for comparison purposes. Markov chain was really giving us great results. I'll show you the results in the next slide, but there was also another novelty in this work. So when you look at these devices, IoT devices, the devices were built with simple constructs, right? They did not have the understanding of context. So for example, you're walking, you're talking, you're doing something with the device, but you're thinking that only one sensor is activated. In fact, more than one sensor is activated, and we built our own algorithms utilizing this observation. So at time 0, right, you have several sensors activated: accelerometer, gyroscope, light, GPS, etc. And then you look at it at time 2, different set of sensors. And then at time n, you have different sensors. So capturing this profile and putting it into machine learning, we were able to have really great results. So here on the top, you are seeing the results related to the smartwatch. At the bottom, you see the results related to the smartphone. And as you see, our results are really, really good with, as you can see with the F-score, accuracy, false positive rates, etc., with comparing these 3 different machine learning algorithms: Markov chain, Bayes, and as I said, Markov chain was really very promising. And we did the same result with the smartwatch. We had also similar observations. We also looked at the performance overhead because in order to claim that our work is really good, we needed to show that it was creating minimal overhead on the devices and applications. So this was very novel at that time, a novel context-aware sensor-based attack detector. So the context awareness is very important when we move into the 6G, 5G realization of the large-scale IoT networks and IoT applications. So my keyword to the future is that context-aware computing for anyone who's interested in furthering these types of studies. So, as I told you, fingerprinting is an interesting, study, work. Myself, I've been working since 2010, 11 timeframe and we first started with the Wi-Fi access point fingerprinting, and then over the years, we moved on to different devices and applications. So the idea is that you try to identify the devices based on the information that they leak. Okay, there are 2 techniques. One is passive fingerprinting, and the other is active fingerprinting. The passive fingerprinting, you listen to the medium and try to extract meaningful information. And active fingerprinting, you probe the network and then try to identify, based on the responses coming from the other device. Further, you can classify the fingerprinting against 3 dimensions. One is device type fingerprinting, and the other is device fingerprinting. Device type fingerprinting is trying to identify a particular cohort, like whether it's a laptop, a phone, or smartwatch, etc. The class. And device fingerprinting is identifying individual devices within a particular cohort. So why is this an interesting problem? And why, how is really? So the basic analogy is this. We are all human beings. When I talk, I sound different, although we all have internally, similar organs, different from all of you guys, right? All of us are different. And if you look at on the right, this is the internal composition of a smartphone for traffic generation. This is the same for all Samsung models, or, but then it may be different from Samsung to Apple. or even within the same, brand category, if you have different, devices, you will have similar and different compositions. So we thought that, well, by just observing these architectural differences from outside, maybe you can, identify these devices. So again, the question is, why does this matter, right? From the security perspective. The perspective is this. Today, our understanding of the security mostly depends on who you are. We are not questioning the device. It is mostly the case. So I can take your laptop and I can authenticate myself to my network. You can take my laptop and you can authenticate yourself to your own network. Well, some big companies like Google and others have started to, basically giving the consumers the notification saying that, hey, you're connecting from this device, blah, 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 blah. Is this you? Or you're connecting to Amazon. Amazon says, hey, you're coming from this device. They are doing it at the software and the highest level, right? So this shows a little bit that they have started understanding the danger, the potential of this problem. So today, again, this is what we did in the lab environment. You can take an authenticated credentials from a device and move to a different device, and that different device could still be part of the authentication realm. So this is for that reason, fingerprinting types of works, or similar to fingerprinting, is an external, extra information, complementary information to what you know, and what you expect. So we applied, as I said, I've been working on this for a very long time, but in these unique settings now, I'm going to show you in the following slides, we applied in IoT, we applied in Bluetooth, we applied in LoRa traffic. So the first one is we applied it on Bluetooth Low Energy, BLE. So here we have different smartwatches. And so we basically built our framework. And the crucial thing that we've been using in all these works, okay, we've been looking at the inter-arrival time between the packets. It's surprisingly, it is still working. It is unbelievably a good and powerful feature that we kept using over and over and applied in different protocols and settings. So then we fit the data into a machine learning classifier, and then we pick the best performing algorithm and given the features. So we built 3 test beds using smartwatch, smartphone, and smart tablet. And these are the devices. We had about 20 different devices. And here are results. This is just a sanity check results, basically. As you see here, you can identify individual devices in this, plots easily. But of course, this doesn't make sense if I don't, show you how this scales up, right? So we further did this, and then we look at the identification accuracy results. As you see, our results were really very, promising. Over 90% accuracy in most cases. So we apply this in Z-Wave and also ZigBee protocol devices. In this slide, you see those results. Again, we had really promising results and very good, high accuracy results when we apply this in ZigBee and Z-Wave cases. Last year, we, challenged ourselves to work on LoRa. LoRa is an interesting protocol. It's been, actively utilized in different smart city applications in Europe. I don't know the case for Canada, honestly, too much, but in the US, Comcast, it's one of the major cable companies, and they've started offering as a competitor to wireless carriers some internet offerings over their infrastructure. To be able to communicate between their stations, neighboring stations, they use LoRa. So we started seeing some more applications, some more traction about the usage of LoRa. And in a government entity, I cannot tell you, like my colleague, which government entity was supporting this, but we had a great results related to LoRa-based applications, fingerprinting as well. So what we did, we put this on a LoRa the UAVs. These are handheld, UAVs. These are like, very small. And we wanted to look at the fingerprinting of these devices. We built a framework and again, fed it with, our test bed with these devices. And here you see the different scenarios of the understanding of the different types of LoRa devices on UAVs. So, I had the accuracy results, but I didn't put it yet. We recently published the results, but I have the further results as well. Obviously, we did not have as many devices, and it was really a small project. And we had only 4 different configurations and settings, but we had plenty of data to actually prove that this is still a working solution. I want to share with you another interesting study about sensitive information tracking.
Just 2 minutes, please, because you have 20 minutes.
Say it again?
Yeah.
How many minutes? How many minutes do I have?
2 minutes now.
I'm sorry?
2 minutes.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. So let me wrap this up then, guys. Okay. So let me quickly, hold on. Let me show you quickly the results, the most important that I think you would appreciate. Okay. So I want to, basically we looked at how IoT apps are leaking information and sensitive information. We analyzed over 500 apps and using different NLP techniques, and we showed that some of them were leaking sensitive information to outside third parties, as you see in this slide. So another interesting study that I think the audience would may be interested in is that we looked at about 22 different devices that are using Zigbee, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth Low Energy, whether it is possible to identify the activities of these devices, even if the traffic was encrypted, okay? So again, we were able to identify with high accuracy what the devices were doing. Other than that, since we have 3 minutes, the cryptojacking is big, so you may want to be interested in looking at, and we looked at how illegal Bitcoin mining can actually be caught, and we have shown several examples of that on IoT devices, smart TVs, etc. And this was a big problem for YouTube, for Zoom servers, and some government entities. So it was really an interesting study. So anyway, so I think, Bernard, this is how we do research in Miami, okay? But we can definitely collaborate, and anyone interested in can get back in touch with, us and the organizers. So these are some of the, papers that I mentioned at top tier conferences. So I feel like this is still an IoT zoo, the environment, the ecosystem. The devices are chatty. There are a lot of devices that are talkative. I think we will see so many different interesting problems in this ecosystem. AI is big in this space, like the adversarial machine learning. We start using it, but there are so many interesting problems there as well. Anyway, so here's my information. Thank you for the opportunity. To my colleague, I really, appreciate this invitation. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. And then again, thanks to all colleagues and Abdul Latif. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Sirkak. Thank you for this interesting presentation. I don't know if you have a question, or we switch to because we don't have more the time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Silak. Now we move to Professor Abdullah Shami. You hear me?
Okay. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Professor Abdullah Shami is a professor from Western University, Ottawa, from Canada. Is professor of electrical and computer engineering, and also head of the optimized computing and communication research laboratory. His research about security and also performance optimization, modeling, machine learning, and Professor Ablashami is also editor from many journal and transaction. Professor Ablashami, now we talk about end-to-end 5G prototype. You have the floor is yours, Professor.
Okay, thank you, Abdulatif. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So again, thank you very much for the invitations, and it was very interesting to listen to the previous speakers. It's very interesting, so thank you. My name is Abdullah Shami, as Abdulatif mentioned, and I'm from University of Western Ontario, Western University in London, Ontario, Canada. And today I believe my understanding, I have around 20 minutes, so I'll try to just do that time, is about a prototype that we have built into our lab, which is the end-to-end 5G prototype. And just I'm going to show a use case as well as some security challenges and some potential solution for those security challenges were implemented in our prototype. So this is the outline. So basically, I'm going to go over just brief introductions about 5G core, about 5G, again, the various architecture components, just to show what's our contributions in that specific prototype. I'm going to go over the prototype architectures, then I'm going to show a use case, which is a model drift and detection and adaptation, which is very important in some to defend against some security attacks. And then at the end, I'm going to just talk about some use cases where security solution present some potential security solution architecture using our own prototype. So if you look about for a 5G system, basically this figure shows the main architectural component of a 5G network. So just basically to help us establish a foundation for understanding the prototype itself that we have built, and also how this prototype can be used to perform various research in the various components in that end-to-end 5G prototype. So basically, if we start from the left here, what we have a network provides connectivity to devices that usually are on the move in wireless networks. Those devices, the user equipment, usually traditionally corresponds to smartphone, tablets, but again, recently we are seeing increasing these devices increasingly include cars, drones, robots, agriculture and industrial machine, home appliances, etc. Now, the second architectural component, which is the radio access network, the RAN, which is usually managed the radio spectrum, making sure that it's used efficiently to meet the quality of service requirement for every users, and they usually corresponds to multiple base stations, etc. We have the edge also clouds that provide computational resources and are placed close to the end users. And the core, which is the main focus of our prototype, is a bundle usually of functionalities as opposed to devices that serves several purposes. For example, provides internet connectivity to both data and voice services. It ensures this connectivity fulfills promises, quality of service. Again, there are some network functions that track users, subscriber users for billing and charging purposes, etc. So this is another review of this basically end-to-end architecture component. So have the RAN. So why I'm showing this, because we need to have a prototype that's flexible enough that we can have multiple technologies at each one of those architectural components. So for example, on the RAN side, we can use a simulator, for example, like RANSIM, or we can use other RAN technologies like Open RAN, or etc. So the key enabling technologies that we are all aware of, those are two key enabling technologies that enable us at least that motivated us to build our own prototype are the network function virtualization, network slicing, because with those network function virtualizations, network slicing, we have the ability to interact with with virtual network functions, collect some data, get some insights about those data, and then act on those insights. Again, this is another review of 5G networks. So if we can see over here, we have RAN, we have base stations, we have the core networks, etc. And the 5G core is the heart of the architecture, where key functions, as we are going to see later on, are arranged in service-based architecture, and usually they are cloud-only. Now, again, as I mentioned, our main focus would be on the 5G core. So if I give an overview about, the 5G core, so if we look at basically the evolution of the core network, so in every evolution, we can see some similarities and some changes. So if you see the core network, basically it consists of many logical nodes. Each of those network elements, all of those nodes or network elements, usually are interconnected by means of some standardized interfaces, basically to allow, as we know, multi-vendor interoperability. So if we look at the 4G core network, it consists mainly of 5 main core functions, the MME, HSS, PCRF, SGW, etc. Each one of them has its own function. Now, while the 4G core has evolved to the 5G core, on the right side of my slide, the 5G core gained new capabilities, and also some of those functions are divided into more functions, but the general architectures remain the same. So one of the most significant difference between 4G and 5G network is the separation of control and user plane functions from each other. Now, if I just some of those functions, let's say the AMF, which is the access and mobility management function, basically supports registration management, connection management, registration management, connection management, and mobility management. The SMF, which is the session management function, is support the session management that includes the session establishment, modification, release, etc. And also it's responsible for user equipment IP address allocations. One of the key network functions in 5G core is the NSSF, which is the network slice selection function, which is support selecting of the network slice instances to serve a specific user equipment. Okay, so with the representation, because we have those network functions in the core, those they need to interact with each other so they can interact with various interfaces. So there are 2 main representations of the 5G core. One of them is reference point architecture, and the other is the service-based architecture. Now, in the reference point architecture, it's much similar to 3GPP, where it defines function and interfaces between them, because this is our main goal. Again, if you would like to defend about tax, we need to have a view. We need to understand the state of each one of those network functions, and then get insights from those data collected from those network functions. And this has to be done through those interfaces. So the other interface, which is the service-based architecture, which through this service-based architecture, data analytics is able to collect data analytic functions, and statistics about all the other core functions without having an explicit point-to-point interface defined between those network architectures. And usually with service-based architectures, this data collections and statistic collection that can go both ways, it's done through APIs. Now, we talked a lot about services. What do I mean a service in the context of 5G core? So basically, a service is atomized capability in a 5G network. So each one of those entity or service should have the characteristic of loose coupling, independent management from any other services, etc. So that means if you would like to update individual service, we should be able to do that with minimal impact to other services, and also we should be able to deploy a service in demand. And usually we invoke a service through certain interface through some APIs. Now, again, this is another view of the 5G core over here. As you can see, we have those network functions. And in our lab, what we built basically the network analytics function, which is the NWDAF. So in addition to those network functions that I briefly earlier discussed, this is our main contribution to that prototype, because as I'm going to show later on, we use an open source 5G core, but what we did, we added this NWDAF. And the WDAF basically represents the operator managed network analytics, which is a logical functions, which is provide slice-specific data analytics to any given network function. So it provides those analytics and also collects some analytics, some statistics from each of the network functions. And here the diagram just demonstrates the 5G architecture with distributed NWDAF. This means that we may have an edge NWDAF. Each one of those will be responsible of collecting and communications, and those data would be basically communicated to the central NWDAF. And each one of those edge NWDAF would be responsible for something. For example, they can be responsible for a specific slice. So the responsibility is to get the slice-specific information, get the insight on those slice-specific information or data collecting, and then act on them. So here, to build the network functions inside the core, basically we need to follow certain requirements. First, each one of those network functions or this network data analytic function should have access to real-time network and data services, and it should leverage data to enhance 5G microservice operations. It should assure public service requirement and service level agreement in a dynamic network environment. It can be used to predict the performance bottleneck, and also it can be used to fine-tune and balance network loads based on capacity or other metrics. Now, in our NWDAF, it's fully compliant with 3GPP latest technical specification, which is release 17.2. It provides active network intelligence to collect those data. So we have databases, and those data, when I talk about control data, that means we are talking about millions of packets per second. It also provides supported functionality to other network functions, so communication, the control information goes both ways. And also it supports NSF in network slice maintenance, and also it supports the PCF in streaming traffic policies. So in our prototype, this is the architecture of our prototype. So in our RAN, for the result I'm going to show here, we used an emulator, which is the Ieee ransom emulator. For the 5G core, as I'm going to show in a bit, we use the Open5GS, which is a real 5G core open source, where we have implemented our own NWDAF. The connected users, we have many users. Now on the RAN side, we are moving to use a wireless-based RAN, a physical RAN, and we will show the results later on when they are available. Now, the technology that we use on the prototype, we use technologies, mature technology, open source technologies that are basically widely used in the industry. We use ONAP, we use Open5GS, as I mentioned. We tried with free 5GC, and it's good, but we preferred Open5GS. We're using Cloudify. On the RAN side, we're using some ORAN right now, test pads. So. Now, why we use Open5GS? Because, again, we extended Open5GS, as I mentioned, to add the NWDAF functions, because Open5GS is implemented implement the 5G core, and it's using C language. It's 3GPP specification compliant, and it's emulated on Ubuntu virtual machines, can be emulated in private networks, and also following the control and using plane separation design principle, and it's sponsored by multiple organizations. And another important reason for choosing Open5GS is the licensing. The license is AGPL 3.0, which is give legal permission to copy, distribute, and modify, etc. So again, this is what we've done. This is the NWDAF. So basically, we built this network functions that's able to talk to all the other network function in the 5G core, and also in the RAN sites, collect those information. And inside that NWDAF, we have multiple levels that includes machine learning models to get the insights from the data collected, and then to communicate some decisions or actions to the network function themselves. So this is a use case. The use case basically is about the drift detection and adaptation. I'll show a little bit why drift detection is very important in security use cases later on. But here, basically, let me first establish what I mean by model drift. A model drift in machine learning can lack the machine learning implementation, and it appears usually when the deployed environment is not the same as the trained environment. And we know that will be the use case in any network because of the dynamicity of the network environment. So it manifests usually itself to two types of model drift, the concept and the data drift. The concept drift, you define the fundamental change basically in the underlying relationship between the input and the output. So the relationship between the input and the output changes between the time that we train that models on some data sets and the time that we have that model is deployed in the network. But the data drift defines a change in the observed data distribution without a change in the underlying relationship. So this is basically just change between the distribution of the relationship between the features themselves. So here in this use case, we'll be dealing with concept drift. So that means we'll assume that will be a fundamental change has occurred in the relationship between the input and the output. So here again, we are just trying to demonstrate that we are able to detect a drift, a concept drift, and we are able to adapt that drift in real time using this NWDAF models that we have built. So for our experiment that we have built, we have basically built an application server which is, supports image downloading. So we have users just downloading images. And we have three concepts, so that means we can think about them, three classes that represents three concepts. The first class is basically we have user equipment that are requesting small images that the frequency of request is very high. The second class is a medium frequency request with medium image size. And the final class is low frequency request of large image sizes. This is again the experiment itself. So we have those three concepts. All those requests, they go through the GNODB, to the 5G core functions, where they go through those various network functions through the control plane or to data planes. All data are connected inside and then collect through the NWDAF. The NWDAF, we have those machine learning models, and then we'll get the insights about the data collected. And then the request will go to the application server. The application server replied with sending the image. So the simple machine learning model in this case is just to predict the UE throughput. So I'm going to go over it quickly because we still have only 5 minutes. So I'm going over this. So this is what we've built. Again, this is the main goal. Is just if we train a machine learning model, deploy it, would we be able to detect that there is a drift? That means the performance of that model is degrading. Degrading is not performance as expected, and what we do right at that time. And this is what we have built in that prototype, and we were able basically to detect the drift and adapt to the drift. So in this first, basically over here, those blocks, basically this is the training, which is regular training, which is here just we need to determine the threshold acceptable thresholds that we believe the output of that machine learning model deployed is acceptable or not. So this is all those steps over here just to determine the threshold. Now, from here, once we have the machine learning model deployed, basically we feed that model, right, the new data batch. We do the prediction, compute some statistics, and then those statistics basically, because it's time series data, so it means prediction, let's say for time frame ahead, or basically for time steps ahead, 20 time steps ahead. So we'll be able later on to compute the error, right? What's the error performed by prediction error. So once we compute that prediction error, basically we can see over here, is it within the threshold, acceptable threshold or not? If it's within the acceptable threshold, here we need to make a decision with this new data batch. What do we do with it, right? Do we keep it in the memory so we can use it later on if we would like to retrain our model or not? If yes, so basically just we add to the pool. If no, basically we do nothing, just we wait for the new batch of data. But if the output is not within the acceptable threshold, basically here an alarm is raised. The alarm is raised, and then we need to add that batch of data to the data pool, and then we can continue with training. So basically we will train the model in the online. And here our main goal again is just to minimize those number of raise alarms. Okay? We don't want to perform this retraining as in many times, because once we do this, then means we are using more computational powers, and also probably this retraining may take more time than we can tolerate. So again, so here just to show that the model deployed this framework was able to detect the concepts that there is a drift detected, and also over here that this framework was able to minimize the raise alarm by around 84%. Now here, if I go how we can use this in, for security, to address some security concerns. So if we take that NWDAF, so we can deploy AIML technique basically for diagnostic analytics, because all data are collected. And again, we can have various use cases because all various user equipments and all applications can be connected to that prototype. We can use predictive analytics, right, to forecast future events, prevent attacks, and also can be used to prospective analytics, where we can utilize prediction to suggest decision options for choosing appropriate countermeasures, etc. And here right now, what we are working on automated security framework. When I say AutoML, basically in this case, how we can automate the various the various steps in training machine learning models and deploying machine learning models. So, for example, the way we are doing it is how we can do intrusion and anomaly detections, where we can automatically detect the various types of attacks. And then we need to perform some kind of root cause analysis, and then we need to perform autonomous recovery. Now here, when I talk about AutoML, basically automated the data pre-processing and including the feature engineering. So even when we deploy a model, when we detect a drift, and we need to not just retrain the model, probably we may need to change the model architectures when it's being change the model architecture. So that means probably we may need to change the number of layers, the number of layers. Probably we need to add new features. Those new features probably were not important during the first time we trained that models on the old data. Probably we need to remove features, how we can automate this data pre-processing and feature engineering in an efficient manner. Also, we need to automate without human intervention as much as possible, the model selections, the network architecture search, as well as the hyperparameter optimizations. And also we can maintain the high performance rate by continuously learning new data. So we can use online adaptive learning models, and this will help us basically to overcome certain challenges. The zero-day attacks is, we can think about a new attack, like a new concept, how we can detect this new attack and how we can automatically train on this new data and then deploy the model without or with minimum human interactions. And also we can overcome with AutoML second challenge, which is concept drift issues caused by the dynamic nature of network environment. Again, also we have different kind of attacks on the machine learning models themselves, like data poisoning attacks, data injection attacks, data phishing attacks, etc. What are the countermeasures that can be used against those attacks? Again, we can use the concept drift methods, right, where we can identify our model performance degradation to defend against adversarial machine learning attacks. We can use GAN network to synthesize a new sample based on past legitimate samples. And also we can automatically identify malicious adversarial samples and remove them. This is all through AutoML, and this is an active research that we are working on. I believe I am within my 20 minutes, and those are some published work based on this, on the prototypes, and also some ongoing works, and those are the credits for the team, Ali, Dimitri, Lee, Mirna, and Anwar. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Nashani. You have any questions?
Thank you, Professor, for your great presentation. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So in the model drift part, I'm just wondering what are the metrics you are using to assess your model? And also what data are you using?
Okay. So basically, the performance metric we're using. So I'm using various performance metrics. I mean, for example, in this case, I believe it was a classifier. So we're using accuracy, F1 score. I mean, all the metrics possible. And again, those statistics can be user specific. Right? What's important, for example, in these use cases. I can share with you the paper with all the metrics. So here, why I haven't presented the metrics. Because again, our main objective was, are we able to detect a drift? Okay, in this environments where we have millions of packets that are being processed every time step, and can we use various metrics? And the answer was yes. So we can use any metrics, and in those research papers, in each one of the papers, we use various metrics. It depends. Are we doing, for example, the classifications, or we're doing, for example, other kind of predictions, let's say traffic flow predictions or etc.
Okay. Other question? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Abdullah, Shami.
Thank you for the invitations. And,
inshallah, another time in person in Morocco, inshallah. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Right, from Miami all the way to Texas. It's a great pleasure to have with us Lawrence Hughes, a legend in IPv6 for the last 2 or 3 decades. He has written an excellent book, as a matter of fact, called The Third Internet. It should be called The New Internet, but I think he's right to call it the True Internet. And he's going to talk about IPv6, or he has changed the title, Decentralized Secure Messaging with Peer TLS. So Lawrence, thank you for joining.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Very well.
Okay, well, it's good to see you again, Latif, old friend of mine, or a friend that I've known for a very long time, I should say. Okay, basically what I'm going to be talking about today is kind of a radically new approach to messaging made possible by IPv6. Historically, for the last 30 years or so, we've been doing centralized messaging because IPv4 and NAT forced it on us. In fact, the entire time we've had internet on phones, they basically have had only private addresses and could only make outgoing connections. Now that most phones have IPv6 on them, they can actually accept incoming connections. So you could actually run servers on your phone, or you could connect directly from my phone to yours with no intermediary server. So we can completely decentralize messaging. Now, I've got background in IPv6 since about 2004, and I've actually pioneered doing this. This is an example of what you can do with the new end-to-end internet made possible by IPv6. We've gotten rid of NAT, so now incoming connections are allowed to any node in the world, and in fact, from any node to any node. And I've taken traditional TLS, formerly known as SSL, and extended it to be peer TLS over an end-to-end direct connection. So basically, I'll be talking about how to do that. And the interesting thing about this is it's actually applicable to existing IETF messaging standards like SMTP and FTP and VoIP and so on. And it does actually work. I'm not just speculating about this. I've made these things actually work between two phones or between a phone and a Windows system. And this is exciting because this is the future of messaging. Now, I have a lot of background in PKI. I created all the training at VeriSign a number of years ago. And recently I released a book that includes a lot of details on how PKI works and how you secure messaging with it using digital certificates and so on. And then more recently, I've released a book on the third generation internet, which means IPv6. So the subtitle gives it away there, Reinventing Computer Networks with IPv6. And I actually discuss some of these concepts in these two books. But basically, the first question that people ask is, Well, is IPv6 actually there? This isn't just something that, academics talk about or whatever. No, IPv6 is really here today. Most advanced countries, over 50% of the internet traffic is actually going over IPv6. Many people are not aware of that, but especially on phones, in many cases, 90% or more of the traffic is over IPv6. In fact, T-Mobile has eliminated IPv4. So when you get a connection to T-Mobile from an Android phone, it's going to be over an IPv6 only connection. And they use something exciting called 464 XLAT to actually allow even legacy IPv4 only apps to work in this IPv6 only environment. So yes, IPv6 is definitely here now. Something like 41% of all the connections to google.com from the entire world are now over IPv6. This is a true generational change. It's kind of like the switch we made from ARPANET to IPv4 way back in 1983. So I consider the ARPANET to be the first generation internet, the IPv4 era to be the second generation, and now IPv6 is the third generation. So you can see the example, a node address back in the ARPANET was just like 10, some decimal number from 0 to 255 because it was 8-bit addresses. In the IPv4, we came up with dotted decimal, 10.1.2.3. Well, in the third internet, we have addresses that include hexadecimal and are kind of long because they're 128 bits in length. 128 bits gives us something like 340 trillion possible addresses. So now everything can have its own public address, every node that's connected to the internet. This is a radically different situation. Now, so since IPv6 has 128-bit addresses, every node can have, including phones, can have public addresses, a globally unique public IP address. So they can accept incoming connections from any other node, assuming no firewalls block it. And amazingly, no firewalls are blocking them now, even between phone vendors. So I've actually made a connection, for instance, from Singtel in Singapore to other vendors like in the Philippines and so on. And the connection actually works. Okay, you can now run servers on any node, even phones, or make end-to-end connections directly from my node to yours. No intermediary server is required. In IPv4 plus NAT, if I want to send an email to you, I make a connection to an intermediary email server somewhere. It then relays the message to your email server, then you make a further connection to pick up that email over IMAP. That's 3 connections. If I'm doing chat, typically I would make a connection to an intermediary server and you would make a connection and that server would relay things back and forth between us. With traditional TLS, you can only secure one network connections, for instance, from my email client to my email server. There's no way for me to connect to secure all the way to you. And so TLS is really crippled by using intermediary servers. With peer TLS, on the other hand, I can make a connection directly to your phone, and we can actually encrypt all the way from my phone to yours. And even more importantly, since we're both using client certificates, we can actually know for certain who the other participant is. We can do strong mutual authentication using digital certificates. This is much better than the old centralized method using multiple connections. And so basically with peer TLS, I can make not only connections directly from my phone to yours, they can be completely secure. There's been a lot of problems with people trying to make end-to-end encryption work. And the problem is those intermediary servers and the fact that TLS doesn't really work well in a multi-connection environment. So what is peer TLS? In a traditional client-server TLS, one node acts as the server, and it has a TLS server certificate that identifies the node. Optionally, the client can have a client certificate that identifies a person. More commonly, the client actually just identifies with username and password, which is completely obsolete now. That's so easy to hack, you might as well not have any security. So it'd be better to authenticate with a client certificate, but very few people do that. But basically, because my node cannot connect directly to yours over IPv4 with NAT in the way. We must both connect to some intermediary server. In peer TLS, both nodes have client certificates that identify some person, not a node. All nodes have both a client and a server role. My client connects directly to your server. This gives you true end-to-end encryption and mutual strong authentication. In fact, anyone can act as the originator and anyone can act as the recipient. So basically, if you were calling me, your client would connect to my server. And these are personal servers. They're not servers that handle tens of thousands or millions of users. They're a server that handles one user. So it's a personal server just for you running on your phone. Most hacking and snooping takes place on intermediary nodes. So if we eliminate the intermediary nodes, that problem goes away. Any existing protocol that works with TLS can be made to work with peer TLS. This is possible only if all nodes have public IP addresses, which is now true with IPv6 for the first time in a very long time. So intermediary servers break TLS. TLS works only if there's a single link or connection between the two ends. This works okay on web, where all connections are only one link from browser to server. My browser never connects to your browser. If I can click on a hypertext link, my browser makes a new connection to a different web server. With email, FTP, and most other protocols, you have to have intermediary nodes. We each connect to a server, and each of those connections can be secured with TLS, but there's no way for TLS to secure a path all the way from me to you. With email, there may be multiple intermediary servers between us. So we would have Alice connecting with TLS to an intermediary server, which has a server cert on it, and Bob connecting to an intermediary server over TLS. And so basically, you've got two separate links. On the other hand, with direct connections over IPv6, there's only one link between me and you, or between Alice and Bob in this illustration. And believe it or not, all the existing IETF protocols can actually be made to work. You have to make a few changes in the way the connection happens, but otherwise, the actual protocol works exactly the same way. And so there's no question about whether messages will be compliant, whether you can send everything that you could with the old style or whatever. And these are battle-tested protocols. They've been around for a very long time. So this is not something new I've created. They're existing, well-established IETF protocols. And by the way, there's no need for IMAP, because when I send an email directly to your phone, it goes from my phone to your phone. There's no need for you to pick it up anywhere. It's already there. Okay, now TLS can secure that one link easily. This is true edge computing or decentralized messaging. We no longer need intermediary servers except maybe for delayed messages. For instance, if I'm not online when you are, or for group chat. If I have 25 people exchanging chats or whatever, that's not really amenable to this kind of mode, but you could in theory deploy one centralized server that everybody connects to just for group messaging. This is also very difficult for anyone to snoop on, especially if it's encrypted end to end. The only way to snoop on that sort of thing would be to actually put a Trojan horse on either Alice's node or Bob's node and watch everything that's going to a screen or from his keyboard or whatever. There's no way to snoop on an intermediary node like is commonly done today with internet messaging. Most interception and modification takes place on intermediary servers, so get rid of the intermediary server. Now, like I said, this works with existing messaging protocols. I've actually demonstrated it with SMTP, FTP, VoIP, and chat, and all of them in a secure mode. So no service provider account is required. You don't need an email account or a VoIP account or whatever. Your local personal server is basically your account. Every node has both a client and a personal server for all supported protocols. Since all nodes have a globally unique public IP address, any node can accept incoming connections. There's no NAT to prevent this as there is with IPv4. It's virtually impossible to snoop on a secure end-to-end direct connection. Okay, now this is ideal for IoT and blockchain. IoT devices often need to communicate with each other as peers, ideally not some intermediary node or via some intermediary node. With IPv6 and peer TLS, they can not only do this, but they can do it with true end-to-end encryption and strong mutual authentication. Now, this is ideal for the nodes or the server nodes in an IoT type scheme, not necessarily between the IoT devices, but in theory, that would work as well. In blockchain, again, typically an end user would not use this to connect into a blockchain cloud of servers, but the servers would use it to communicate securely between themselves. Right now, that's done with traditional TLS with all the attendant problems, and they have to communicate through intermediary servers, which introduces insecurities and or vulnerabilities and prevents true end-to-end encryption and mutual authentication. So this would be ideally suited to securing the messaging between the blockchain servers. Okay, now of course, every one of those nodes is going to need IPv6. And so that's the only real requirement. Once you've got that, you're good to go. Now, this is actually a major opportunity to sell billions of new client certificates if you've got any entrepreneurs in the audience. So this could easily become the largest market ever for X509 digital certificates, completely dwarfing the existing vendors. Every phone and every computer will potentially need one, each person using secure messaging. Inexpensive client certs that identify someone via an email address can be provided for casual users, either for free or for a very small fee, with full automation. But premium certificates that identify people and their name, their company, et cetera, can be provided for business users. And the peer TLS will actually exchange that information. So I could know not only who I'm talking to, but what company they're working for and various other information, where they're located in the world. This would give me a very high confidence. I'm actually talking to the person that I think I am. This would require users to submit documents like passports or whatever to the organization that issues these client certificates. Existing CAs can do that, but typically they're more concerned with issuing server certificates, which are not even needed in this scheme. Okay, belt and suspenders. While you can actually have pretty good end-to-end encryption and mutual strong authentication with basic end-to-end SMTPS and FTPS, you can also add SMIME in for an additional layer of security. This would work with both email and file transfer. And yes, you can protect files being sent over FTP using SMIME. I've done it. With SMIME, the privacy and authentication remain in force after the actual connection, so in the message store on the recipient computer. If someone gets into your message store, all the messages are still encrypted, and you know for certain who the sender was. A single dual-purpose certificate can actually be used for both the peer TLS connection and for SMIME, just by putting the appropriate permissions or attributes in these certificates. It could also be used for strong authentication to online services, like a secure IP address registry. So basically, that's the concept. It's something radically new and different. It's a very different way of viewing the internet, but it's made possible by IPv6. So if you noticed on my first slide, the little subtext there was innovation through IPv6. That's been one of my themes for a number of years. Not just getting existing stuff like web and so on to work over IPv6, but doing real innovation, coming up with something that could not have been done under IPv4. And so a lot of people now are beginning to take that approach to the IPv6 internet and doing true innovation for the first time in a long time. So that's my presentation. I'll be glad to answer questions if anybody has some.
Thank you, Lawrence, for that inspiring talk. And basically,
Do we have any questions?
Yeah, we've got a question over here.
Hi, Lawrence. My name's Owen Vaughan. I'm the Chief Science Officer at EnChain, which is a blockchain company in London. Sorry, was there a comment? Oh, we've just been told to wait a second by you. Okay, sorry, Lawrence. Can you hear me?
Closer to the
camera.
camera. Without using the mic because the camera. You hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can.
Not use the mic.
Okay. Hi, Lawrence. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Hi. I love the talk. I'm really aligned with that vision for a future network that's private and is based on certification and devices having that server-client relationship. We've thought a lot about similar ideas at ENSIAS, and I'd love to follow that up with you. Something I mentioned in my talk earlier today is about blockchain transactions. So you mentioned how this can be used for the blockchain network. We absolutely agree in the Bitcoin SV community, and in fact we have a program to make our nodes IPv6 ready. We see that as it could be a very cool security feature, particularly with multicast, because as a user, I can then broadcast my transaction to the whole network. But also, I want to point out direct payments between users, because you commented that they probably wouldn't use this type of interaction, but I think they will. So currently in many blockchain scenarios, the transaction, between Alice and Bob, a merchant and a customer, typically different point of view, peer-to-peer interaction between the payer and the payee. And it's called BIP 270 if you want to look it up. But that's how we model things in our world, and we think that is scalable from the point of view of the node network. And it means the person who's really interested in the transaction, Bob, is the one responsible for sending it to the network. But anyway, part of the reason why that's useful is then Alice and Bob can have a private communication between one another in exactly the way that I think you're describing. We also see the blockchain as a potential platform to store certificates, probably not in raw text, but a commitment of those certificates to add increasing security. For example, it gives you an independent timestamp of when that certificate was issued, and you can also have a revocation scheme where you model the spending of the certificate transaction as the revocation. And the reason we would try and do that is to lower the barrier of entry to becoming a certificate authority, so that we can do these things much more easily to issue certificates to devices and things like that. And we can link those certificates with IPv6 addresses as well. So basically everything you're describing is exactly aligned with what I'm happy if people call Web3. I know that maybe hasn't been fully defined yet, but this type of secure private communication with the security model underpinned by blockchain. So yeah, no questions there, really just thanks for a really good talk, and I like your radical, innovative approach. And yeah, if you have any time, I'd love to follow that up at some point later.
Be glad to discuss that with you, and that is an interesting concept to have Alice connect directly to Bob, and she can send anything, including secured transactions or bitcoins or whatever over that link, and nobody can interfere with it or intercept it or modify it in any way. It truly is, secure from end to end. So that is a great application for this. I had not really thought about that before, but and then of course there would need to be somebody register the transaction into the blockchain. Yes. And you're right, Bob, being the sender, would be the one that would be most interested in doing that. So that would go over some other mechanism, but the interaction between Alice and Bob could be completely secured this way. That's a good approach to using this.
Yep, and as you say, it could be a transaction, it could be data. Alice could be sharing some data with Bob in order to be allowed to use a service online, for example. So yeah, I'm really interested in those user-to-user interactions as well. But yeah, thank you very much.
So just to make it
Thanks for
clear,
your comments.
So Lawrence, if we had the 128-bit on IPv4, you'll be able to do the same thing, right?
Yes.
So
basically, there's all kinds of things you can build on this. It's a general messaging thing, and it's not proprietary. This isn't something that I own or control.
Yeah.
This is IETF standards just applied in a new way. Yeah. And so anybody that wants to do this can implement it themselves. And the interesting thing, you don't require any kind of radical new toolkit. Any existing TLS toolkit can be used to implement applications that do this. The one thing I was worried about when I first started working with this is that the TLS toolkit might have verified that you actually had a server cert on the server. It doesn't. No TLS toolkit I've checked does that. And so a client cert works just fine. The one thing to realize is it's not going to identify the node that you're connecting to. It's going to identify the person. So it really is a person-to-person type of security. It's not a person-to-node type of security as in traditional TLS. So both parties have a client certificate that identified them. So they verify their identities to each other. The certificates will actually work on any node. You're not limited to one node as you are with traditional server certs. So I could use this between any two nodes that I have access to using the same certificates, because it actually identifies me, not my node. So it takes a kind of a step back and a complete rethinking of how security works and how connections work. Yeah. But this is the exciting thing about IPv6. It's making radically new approaches to messaging possible. And so we need to take advantage of this and start actually using this kind of messaging. There's no reason, you can't start deploying it today. Feel free to get in touch with me. You can reach me at lhughes@hughesnet.org. And basically, that will, I'll be glad to pursue this sort of thing or send notes on how I've actually tested this and so on. But I have actually deployed this, and it does work. I was amazed when, first off, the first time I tried implementing a server on a phone, I was wondering, gee, is this going to work? Nobody's ever done it before. It worked fine. All the server type functions in the TLS support and on the phone worked great, without anybody having actually tried it before. So phones are perfectly good for running servers or end-to-end direct connections. I was also curious as to whether there would be firewalls between phone companies. Currently, there aren't. So I can make a connection from any phone in the world to any other phone in the world, and it works. Security folks should be aware that, gee, maybe there's some vulnerabilities there nobody's really thought about. But yeah, when you have IPv6 on your phone, the whole world, in theory, can connect to you. So be aware of that. So we probably need better host-based phone firewalls.
Yeah, so the irony in security is that at the beginning, IPsec was designed for IPv6, then retrofitted into IPv4. Since we didn't have routable IP addresses, IPsec failed, in this case, deployment. That's why we moved to SSL and TLS. So it's quite interesting how now the restoration of IPv6 and IPsec with IPv6 has not caught up at all, which is quite an interesting misfortune for the internet as such. Although, the enterprise, they use IPsec with IPv6, but it's not given to the edge. So normal users are not doing this. So this is really another absolute fantastic work that we need to do, and I would expect blockchain to play a major role in verifying that and reintroducing security for every person. So empowering everyone with security. Okay?
Yes.
I want to say to Lawrence, I bet after you implemented that, you first, after it was successful, you then probably thought, why has no one else done this before?
It's because everybody else is locked into IPv4 think.
That's correct, yeah. The thinking is really, so they are locked into the 90s spirit of security.
No, we have the same kind of thought process when we've been implementing cryptographic generated addresses to link the IP address with a blockchain transaction. That could really complement what you're doing here, so I love to feel that.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, we could actually somehow link the digital certificate to the person's identity too, either with CGAs or additional information in the S/MIME certificate. There's a lot of interesting possibilities we could do here. But yeah, in theory, you could actually generate a CGA and make that available as your address. One thing I haven't discussed here is how Bob finds Alice's address to connect to her. And that's a bit of a challenge because you can't use DNS because Alice's phone is probably not in DNS. It probably doesn't even have a fully qualified domain name. So I've actually come up with something I call a secure address registry where I can actually publish my current IPv6 address in it. And anyone else can look it up using my phone number or my email address. And not only can you store the current IPv6 address and update it if you move around, but you could actually store your certificate there. So if somebody wanted to send you an encrypted file, they could get your address or you could get your digital certificate and encrypt it with it and send it to you even if you're not currently online. So that secure address registry is an important part of this, and I actually deployed that as part of my proof of concept. So it's time to have a DNS2. It goes beyond the capabilities of the old DNS, which was really designed for the centralized IPv4 with NAT model, and does great there.
It sounds so similar Paymail, where it's like it looks like an email address, like owen@paymail.com, and it returns my Bitcoin addresses that I want you to use. So it could be very similar to what you're saying, I think.
Yeah, we've got to get away from fully qualified domain names. Those are linked to actual nodes. We need something that I can find the identity information or address for a person, not what node they're currently on. And so we need something that is a replacement for DNS, and I've been working on that as well. And you can actually, it can be authenticated. So when I connect to it, I could use my client digital cert to authenticate to that, so it knows for certain who I am, and nobody else can change my information. With DNS, anybody could change any registry I made via protocol. So again, this is another part of the whole decentralized messaging scheme, a secure address registry. So there's a lot of areas here that we can work on. Feel free to get in touch. I'd be glad to work with you. I think there's a lot of interplay we could do. And I've been looking forward to working with people actually doing blockchain stuff because it ties in so beautifully.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Laurence, for this excellent presentation. And we end our IEEE Summit. And thank you all.
Recording stopped.
Thank you all for your presence. You have not more people now because it's a very long journey. And thank you very much for all the keynote speakers present here in person in this workshop. And thank you very much for Professor Latif Ladid for your support, for your encouragement. Thank you very much.